You climb the final step of the narrow wooden staircase and pause at the top, letting your breath settle into the deep quiet of the upper keep. The corridor behind you is lost in shadow, the oil lamps along the lower halls already dimmed for the night. Here, at the end of a short passage with beams of dark cypress overhead, a single sliding door of paper and lattice stands closed. You reach out and push it aside with a slow, even pressure, feeling the familiar slight resistance of the frame before it glides open without a sound. The room beyond is small and square, no larger than 4 tatami mats laid side by side. A high window set into the thick outer wall admits the last trace of dusk, a cool grey light that barely touches the edges of the room. You step inside, slide the door shut behind you, and stand for a moment in the near darkness, allowing your eyes to adjust. The air here is still, holding a faint blend of old iron, dried rice paste, and a hint of camellia oil. It is a scent you have known for years, one that speaks of patient upkeep and the slow passage of time. The wooden floorboards, worn smooth by countless footsteps, give slightly under your weight. To your left, against the inner wall, a low shelf holds the things you will need. On the right, centered in the room, stands the armor rack, a simple wooden frame shaped like a cross, its arms outstretched to hold the weight of iron and lacquer. And there, upon it, the full set of samurai armor rests in silence, its dark plates and faded silk cords catching the faint light like a figure seated in deep meditation. The helmet sits at the top, its curved neck guard spreading outward, while the chest plate and shoulder boards hang in perfect alignment. The skirt of lacquered tiles drapes toward the floor, and the shin guards stand upright at the base. The entire assembly has the calm dignity of something long at rest. You turn first to the shelf. There are 2 bronze lanterns waiting there, each with a small dish of oil and a twisted cotton wick. You lift the first lantern and carry it to the center of the room, placing it on a flat stone tile that serves as a safe base. From your sleeve you take a thin striker and a piece of charred cloth, then kneel down. With a gentle scraping motion, you strike a spark onto the cloth, blow softly until a tiny flame appears, and touch it to the wick. The wick catches, and a small golden flame rises, settling quickly into a steady teardrop shape. You adjust the length of the wick by pinching the burnt tip between moistened fingers, then repeat the same process for the second lantern, lighting it from the first before placing it a short distance away on the opposite side of the armor rack. Now the room takes shape in a warm amber glow. The light pulls on the wooden floor, stretching soft shadows up the plastered walls. The armor, once a dark silhouette, reveals its details, the deep russet of the iron plates, the indigo of the silk braids, the dull shimmer of lacquer on the helmet's dome. You see the fine network of tiny scratches on the chest plate, marks left by a cloth over many seasons, not flaws, but evidence of care. The room feels enclosed, protected, as if the stone walls and thick beams are holding the night at bay. You move to the shelf again and begin to gather the tools of your work. First is a soft cotton cloth, folded into a neat square, its fibers worn thin from repeated washings. Next, a piece of fine deer leather, tanned to a pale brown and cut into a small rectangle that fits comfortably in your palm. There is a small ceramic dish, unglazed and slightly rough on the underside, containing a mound of powdered whetstone so fine it feels like smooth clay when pressed. You lift the dish, check the level of powder, and set it down carefully near the lanterns. Then you find the pot of clove-scented oil, a dark earthenware vessel with a wooden stopper wrapped in waxed cord. The oil inside has thickened slightly in the cool air, but it will loosen once warmed by your hands. You place the pot beside the dish. Finally, you take a slender bamboo pick, a wooden needle, and a small knife with a blade no longer than your thumb, all resting in a shallow tray. These smaller tools you carry over and arrange in a row on the floor next to the first lantern. Everything is ready. You lower yourself onto a worn floor cushion placed directly in front of the armor rack, the cushion's fabric indented from years of use. Your knees find the familiar hollows, and you sit back on your heels, your spine straightening without thought. From this position, the armor seems to tower over you, yet you feel no intimidation. The silence of the room wraps around you like a heavy quilt, and the only movement is the gentle quiver of the lantern flames and the slow rise and fall of your own chest. You pause. This pause is a ritual in itself, a moment to let the outside world fall away. The castle below holds sleeping attendants, resting guards, and the distant murmur of a fountain in the inner garden. But here, none of that can reach you. The walls are thick, the door is shut, and the window shows only a square of deepening night sky. You notice the weight of the room's stillness, a familiar presence that you have come to associate with the armor and its long hours of maintenance. It is a silence that does not ask for anything except your attention, a quiet that allows your thoughts to slow until they match the pace of the lantern's slow burn. Your gaze travels over the armor, tracing the outline of each piece. The helmet, or kabuto, stands at the summit, its rounded bowl covered in black lacquer that gleams faintly where the light strikes it. A series of small iron rivets runs along the brim, each one darkened with age. Below the brim, the neck guard cascades in 5 overlapping bands, each band laced to the next with silk cord of deep indigo that has softened over time to a dusty blue. The face mask, a half mask of iron shaped with a wrinkled nose and an open mouth, hangs from a hook on the rack's upright post, looking straight ahead with empty eyes. The throat guard, a simple plate of lacquered iron, rests just beneath it. Below the helmet assembly, the torso armor curves outward. The chest plate, a single piece of hammered iron, is coated in the same deep russet lacquer, with a subtle pattern of diagonal lines etched near the shoulders. The back plate mirrors it, and the two are joined at the sides by leather straps and bronze buckles. The shoulder boards, large rectangular panels made of small lacquered scales sewn onto fabric, hang from the crossbar like the folded wings of a resting bird. Each scale overlaps the next with perfect regularity, and the silk lacing that binds them runs in horizontal rows of alternating color, a line of faded white, then indigo, then a thin line of gold that catches the light. The armored sleeves or coat lie draped over the rack's lower arms, their fabric dyed a dark brown. Small metal plates are sewn into the cloth at the forearms, and a fine chainmail mesh covers the backs of the hands. The thigh guard, a heavy apron of lacquered tiles attached to a broad cloth belt, hangs from the rack's waist section, its tiles arranged in vertical columns that overlap like the shingles of a roof. Below that, the shin guards stand upright, each one made of 3 vertical iron splints connected by copper hinges and secured with leather straps. The toe caps, curved and dark, are placed at the very bottom, aligned neatly with the shin guards. You look at all of these pieces and see not just armor, but a long story told in materials and thread. The scuffs on the chest plate, the slight fraying of certain silk cords, the gentle wearing of the leather straps, each detail marks a season of use, a journey, a time of standing ready. You know the armor well, having cared for it through many months, yet each evening you approach it as if for the first time, with a quiet curiosity about what you will find. You reach for the soft cotton cloth and unfold it across your lap. The cloth is cool and clean, smelling faintly of the plain soap used to wash it. You smooth it flat, then lift one corner and hold it up to the lantern light. There are no loose threads, no trapped grit that might scratch the lacquer. Satisfied, you set it aside and take the deer leather, rubbing it between your palms to warm it. The leather softens at once, becoming pliable and slightly tacky to the touch. You lay it next to the cloth. Now you pick up the ceramic dish of powdered stone. You tilt it, letting the powder slide to one side, and examine its consistency. It is fine, like ground chalk, with a pale grey color that seems to absorb the lantern light rather than reflect it. You run the tip of your little finger through the powder, feeling its silky texture, then tap the edge of the dish to level it again. This powder, mixed with a drop of oil, will become a gentle polishing paste that can remove tiny spots of rust without harming the iron. The clove-scented oil pot is next. You pull the waxed cord free, work the stopper loose with a slight twist, and set it aside on the tray. A thin, spicy fragrance rises from the open pot, mixing with the room's metallic scent in a way that is both sharp and comforting. You dip the tip of a clean finger into the oil, testing its flow. It comes away coated in a glossy film that catches the light with a faint amber tint. You wipe the finger on the cotton cloth, then seal the pot again to keep the oil from cooling too quickly. The bamboo pick, wooden needle, and small knife you leave in the tray for now. They will be needed later for the fine work around rivets and lacing. The knife's blade is wrapped in a strip of oiled paper to protect its edge, and you check that the paper is secure before placing it back. With the tools arranged and the light steady, you allow yourself to settle even further into the cushion, your weight shifting slightly until you find the exact position you will hold for the next several hours. Your shoulders drop, your hands rest lightly on your thighs, and your breathing slows. The room's silence deepens, broken only by the soft hiss of the lanterns and the occasional creak of a cooling beam overhead. Outside, the wind might be moving through the pine trees on the mountainside, or an owl might be calling from the ridge. But inside the stone keep, these sounds are so faint they become part of the silence itself. You look at the armor again, this time focusing on the helmet. The lacquer on the dome is dusty, a fine grey film that softens the shine. Your first task will be to wipe that dust away, using the cotton cloth in slow circular passes. You imagine the motion, the way the cloth will glide over the curve, the slight pressure needed to lift the dust without scratching the surface. It is a simple task, repetitive and undemanding, one that will occupy your hands while your mind drifts into a calm, unhurried state. Your gaze moves to the neck guard, where the silk cords are slightly dusty as well. You will take the brush, a soft one made from squirrel hair, and sweep along the cords, following their weave from top to bottom. Where the cords cross, you will check for any signs of wear, any loosening of the knots that hold the bands together. The work requires no force, only patience. The brush will move with the same gentle rhythm as the cloth, back and forth, up and down, until every cord is clean. You consider the iron surfaces, the chest plate, the shoulder boards, the shin guards. There might be small spots of discoloration where moisture has touched the metal, even in this dry room. For those, you will mix a tiny amount of the polishing paste on the deer leather, then rub it onto the iron with a motion that follows the grain of the metal. The paste will turn dark as it picks up the oxidation, and you will wipe it away with a clean section of the cloth, revealing a smooth, even surface beneath. You will check each plate under the lantern light, tilting it to see if any spot needs more attention. The process is slow, methodical, and deeply satisfying in its lack of urgency. You think about the leather straps and buckles. They will need a light coating of oil to remain supple, and you will apply it with a fingertip, rubbing it into the hide until it disappears. The buckles will be wiped clean of any greenish residue that sometimes forms on bronze, using a corner of the cloth moistened with a single drop of oil. Each buckle will be turned over, inspected, and set back exactly as it was. The silk lacing, the true skeleton of the armor, will receive the most delicate care. You will use the wooden needle to adjust any cord that has slipped out of place, tucking it back under its neighbor and pulling it snug. The bamboo pick will clean the tiny spaces between the lacquered scales of the shoulder boards, dislodging particles of dust that the brush cannot reach. The small knife will be used only if you find a frayed thread that must be trimmed and sealed with a dab of rice glue. A repair that happens rarely, but requires a steady hand and complete stillness. All of this lies ahead, a sequence of small, gentle actions that will carry you through the evening. You do not feel tired or restless, only a quiet readiness. The lantern flames burn steadily, their light a constant companion. The room holds its peace, and you are at the center of it, a servant whose sole duty for the next few hours is to polish, to clean, to preserve. Nothing else is expected of you, and nothing else is needed. You stretch your fingers, feeling the slight stiffness from the climb, then let them relax. The cushion is comfortable, the floor is solid, and the armor waits. You pick up the cotton cloth, folding it once more into a neat pad, and hold it in your right hand. The helmet will be first, you decide, the highest point. You will lift it carefully from the rack, cradle it in your lap, and begin. But before you move, you stay still for one more moment. The stillness is its own kind of work, a preparation that cannot be rushed. You listen to the lanterns, a pair of small, steady breaths. You listen to the lanterns, a pair of small, steady breaths. You feel the cool air on your cheeks, the slight weight of your sleeves. You smell the oil, the ancient wood. You watch the armor silhouette, a shape that has seen battles and ceremonies and long years of storage in this very room. It has been cared for by hands before yours, and it will be cared for by hands after. You're part of a chain of quiet attention, a line of servants who've sat on this cushion, lit these lanterns, and begun this same work. The thought brings a slow calm, a sense of place that settles into your bones. There is no hurry, the night is long, and the armor asks only for your presence. You lift your eyes to the helmet once more, noting how the lantern light traces the curve of its dome, and then you let your gaze drop to the cloth in your hand. The first movement, when it comes, will be slow and deliberate, a soft wipe across the lacquered surface. After that, the work will find its own rhythm, and the hours will pass like a gentle stream, one smooth motion after another, until the armor gleams in the darkness and the lanterns burn low. For now, you simply sit. The room holds you in its quiet, and you hold the cloth, ready to begin. You reach up and place your hands on either side of the helmet's rounded bowl, letting your palms settle against the cool, smooth lacquer. The surface is slightly chilled, having surrendered its daytime warmth to the stone room, and the sensation travels up your wrists in a slow, even wave. You pause there, fingers spread wide, feeling the subtle curve of the iron beneath the layers of hardened sap. The helmet is heavier than it appears, its weight concentrated in the dense crown and the metal plates of the neck guard that hang from its rim. Yet it lifts away from the wooden stand with a single steady motion as you straighten your arms. You bring it down carefully, cradling the base in your left hand while your right supports the dome, and settle it onto your lap where the cushion provides a soft, stable seat. The cotton cloth you prepared earlier lies folded across your thigh, and you shift it slightly so that the helmet can rest beside it without touching the floor. For a long moment, you simply look at the piece in your lap, tracing its shape with your eyes as the lantern light plays over every contour. The kabuto is old, older than your own years of service, and its surface holds a deep black that seems to drink the glow rather than reflect it, a darkness that has been built up through many coats of lacquer applied and cured and polished long before you ever climbed these stairs. You turn the helmet slightly, rotating it so that the front faces you, where a short brim projects outward like a shallow eave. The brim is reinforced with a row of ornamental rivets, each one shaped like a tiny mushroom cap and made of dark iron that has mellowed to a soft charcoal grey. The lacquer around them is unbroken, showing no cracks or lifting at the edges. You tilt the helmet to let the lantern shine across the dome from different angles, searching for any flaw that might need attention, any hairline fissure where moisture could creep in. The light slides over the curve without catching on anything, telling you that the lacquer is sound, its integrity whole. There is only a fine film of dust, so faint that it mutes the natural sheen rather than obscuring it, a soft grey veil that you know will lift at the first touch of the cloth. You pick up the clean linen square and fold it twice, forming a pad roughly the size of your hand, its layers pressed flat so that no wrinkles will drag against the delicate surface. The cloth is cool and dry, its weave so fine that it feels almost silky, and you rub a corner of it between your thumb and forefinger to confirm that no grit has settled into the fibers. Satisfied, you lay the pad over the crown of the helmet, covering the highest point where the dust has gathered most thickly, and begin to move your hand in a slow, clockwise circle. The motion is light, barely more than the weight of the cloth itself, and the lacquer responds with a faint whisper that is the only sound in the room aside from the twin lantern flames. Your hand travels round and round, each circle overlapping the last by half its width, so that no section of the dome is missed. The pattern is one you've followed countless times before, a spiral that starts at the very top and gradually widens as it descends toward the brim, and your muscles know it so well that your mind is free to drift. The cloth picks up the dust without scattering it, trapping the fine grey particles in its weave and turning slightly darker with each pass. You pause once to shake the cloth over a small waste bowl that sits near the wall, watching the dust fall in a soft, silent drift, Then refold the pad to expose a clean surface and resume the work. The rhythm of the wiping draws you into a state of quiet absorption, each circle flowing into the next without any sense of beginning or end. The lanterns burn steadily, their flames shaped like slender leaves, and the shadows on the walls stay perfectly still. Your breathing slows to match the pace of your hand, a slow inhale as the cloth sweeps across the front, a slow exhale as it curls around the back. The helmet seems to warm under your touch, giving up its chill to the gentle friction, and the lacquer begins to show its true depth, a gloss like still water under a moonless sky. You can see the faint reflection of the lantern flame now, the tiny inverted flame curved across the dome's belly, wavering only when your hand passes over it. When the main dome is clean, you shift your attention to the brim. The flat surface holds more stubborn dust along its inner edge, where the lacquer meets the rivet heads, and you change your grip on the cloth, folding it into a narrower point that can reach into the tight angles. You run this point along the groove where iron meets iron, moving in short, careful strokes that follow the curve of the brim from one side of the helmet to the other. The dust here is slightly thicker, mixed with tiny flecks of old polish that have dried and lodged themselves over time, and you pause to pick them free with a bamboo sliver before wiping the area clean. The sliver is thin and flexible, its tip sharpened to a fine wedge that slips under each fleck without scratching the lacquer, and you work it slowly, lifting away the pale specks one by one and dropping them into the waste bowl. Now you turn the helmet over, resting its dome on your cushioned lap so that the interior faces upward. The inside is lined with a padded fabric of dark indigo, quilted in a diamond pattern and stitched to a leather band that runs around the rim. You press your fingers gently into the padding, checking for any sign of dampness or moth, and find it dry and firm. A few loose threads along the stitching catch your eye, and you tuck them back under their neighboring stitches with the wooden needle, working the tool with the same steady patience you would use to mend a favorite garment. The thread is old silk. Its color faded from deep blue to a soft gray, but it holds its strength, and you need no glue or knot to secure it. When the inside is tidy, you lay the helmet right side up once more and take up the deer leather. A small pot of clove-scented oil sits open at your side, and you dip a fingertip into the liquid, then transfer a single drop to the center of the leather. You fold the leather over and rub it against itself, spreading the oil into a thin, even coat that leaves the surface slightly tacky. This oiled leather will be used only on the iron parts that are not lacquered, the rivet heads, the small ring at the crown where a crest might be attached, and the thin metal band that secures the brim to the bowl. You begin with the rivets, pressing the leather pad against each one in turn and rubbing in a tight, circular motion. The iron is cool and smooth, its surface darkened by years of careful oiling, and it absorbs the fresh oil with a faint, satisfying sheen. You count the rivets as you go, not from any need to keep track, but from a natural inclination to measure the work. 8 along the front of the brim, 6 more along the back, and 2 small ones on each side where the neck guard attaches. Each one receives the same number of circular strokes, a number you do not consciously choose, but that falls into the rhythm of your counting, and when you are finished, they all glow with the same subdued luster. You set the leather aside and take up a dry section of the cotton cloth, using it to buff the rivet heads until no trace of excess oil remains. The buffing is a faster motion, a series of short, light swipes that blend one rivet into the next, and your hand moves with a practiced economy that wastes no energy. The sound of the cloth against the iron is a soft, rhythmic shushing that joins the whisper of the lantern flames, and together they form a quiet duet that fills the small room without disturbing its stillness. You can feel the castle settling around you, the ancient beams contracting in the cool night air, and you imagine the other servants asleep in their quarters far below, their breathing as slow and even as the sweep of your cloth. The ring at the crown of the helmet is next, a simple iron loop that sits atop a small round base plate. You test it with a gentle pull, ensuring it is firm, then clean it with the oiled leather and buff it dry. The base plate has a faint pattern of concentric circles etched into it, and you trace them with the tip of the bamboo pick to clear away any dust that might have accumulated in the grooves. The pick makes a tiny, scratching sound that is barely audible, a sound like a mouse might make in a distant corner, and it brings a small smile to your lips before fading back into the general quiet. With the metal parts attended to, you return your focus to the lacquered dome. The first wiping removed the dust, but now you want to restore the deeper glow that only a gentle buffing can achieve. You take a fresh section of the cotton cloth, breathe lightly on the lacquer to mist it with the faintest moisture, and begin a new series of circular passes. This time, the motion is even slower, your hand moving with a deliberation that borders on reverence, and the cloth glides over the surface with a friction so slight it feels like polishing glass. The lacquer responds by deepening its color, shifting from black to a rich charcoal, and the lantern light begins to pool on its surface in soft, liquid reflections. You turn the helmet as you work, ensuring that every quadrant receives equal attention. The left side catches the light from the first lantern, the right side from the second, and the interplay of the two flames creates a shifting map of highlights that guide your hand. You watch the reflection of your own fingers moving across the dome, a distorted image that appears and disappears with each pass, and you think of the many hands that have performed the same task over the generations. The helmet has witnessed battles, perhaps, long journeys certainly, but here in this room it has known only patience and gentleness, the steady accumulation of small acts of care. Your mind drifts to the materials themselves, the iron ore smelted in a distant province, the lacquer tapped from trees that grow on southern hillsides, the silk spun from the cocoons of mulberry-fed worms. Each element traveled a long road to become part of this armor, and now it rests in your lap, its journey paused in the amber light. The thought is neither sad nor happy. It is simply a fact that settles into the quiet of the room like another layer of dust, and you accept it without lingering. The buffing continues until the entire dome gleams with a uniform depth, a surface so smooth that it seems to have no texture at all. You lift the helmet to eye level and sight along its curve, checking for any dull spots or streaks, and find none. The lacquer is now a perfect, unbroken dark, reflecting the lantern flames as if they were floating in a midnight pond. You lower the helmet back to your lap and allow your hands to rest for a moment, the cloth draped loosely over your fingers. The bamboo pick comes back into your hand almost without thought, and you direct its point to the tiny spaces around the base of the crest ring, where a minute ridge of hardened polish had collected unnoticed. You work the pick with the care of a scribe, scraping the ridge away in thin, curly shavings that fall into the waste bowl like tiny wood shavings from a plane. The process is slow and utterly absorbing, your eyes focused on a space no wider than a grain of rice, and the room shrinks until it contains only the pick, the ridge, and the steady beat of your own calm attention. When the ridge is gone, you blow a soft breath across the area to dislodge any remaining particles, then buff the spot once more with the cloth until it vanishes into the surrounding gloss. The helmet now stands complete in your lap, its cleaning and polishing finished. You turn it one final time, checking the neck guard attachment points, the rivets, the brim, the dome, the interior padding. Everything is in order, every surface attended to, every fitting secure. The weight of the piece feels good in your hands, a solid, satisfying weight that speaks of protection and purpose. You know that you will now place it back on the armor rack, but you hesitate for a moment longer, enjoying the simple presence of the object and the quiet that surrounds it. The lantern flames flicker at the same instant, as if sharing a private signal, then steady again. The night has grown deeper beyond the high window, the square of sky now a deep indigo, studded with a few faint stars. You cannot see them clearly through the oiled paper, but you know they are there, wheeling slowly overhead in their own ancient patterns. The room holds its silence, and you hold the helmet, and for a stretch of time that has no measure, the two of you are enough. Eventually you lift the helmet from your lap and rise to your knees, reaching forward to place it back upon the armor rack's upright post. You guide it down gently, feeling the wooden peg find its hollow inside the dome, and settle the neck guard so that it hangs straight and even. The helmet resumes its place at the summit of the armor, its polished surface catching the lantern glow and reflecting it softly into the room. You withdraw your hands and sit back on your heels, surveying the work so far. The dome rises above the rest of the armor like a dark, calm hill, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of a small step completed. The cloths, the leather, the oil pot, and the bamboo pick wait beside you for the next task. The neck guard, with its layered bands and silk lacing, will follow. But for now you allow a pause. Your hands fold in your lap, your breathing deep and even, and the lanterns continue to burn with their steady, patient flames. The room is as it was an hour ago, unchanged in every detail, yet somehow it feels even more settled, as if the very walls have drawn closer to listen to the silence. You are simply a servant polishing armor by lantern light, and in the long, slow stretch of the night, that is everything. You reach up to the helmet, where it now rests on its stand, polished and gleaming, and turn your attention to the neck guard that spreads outward from its lower rim like a flared collar. The shikoro is made of 5 curved bands, each one a strip of hardened leather covered in black lacquer that matches the dome above, layered so that they overlap like the eaves of a pagoda roof. Silk cords of faded indigo bind the bands together, passing through small holes drilled at regular intervals and crisscrossing in a pattern that is both decorative and strong. The cords have softened over years of handling, their deep blue reduced to a dusty shade that resembles the sky just after twilight, and they carry a faint, clean scent of old cloth that rises as you lean closer. You lift the neck guard free of its mounting pegs, supporting its weight with both hands, and lower it onto a clean square of fabric spread across the floor in front of your cushion. The shikoro settles with a soft, dry rustle, the sound of lacquered leather touching lacquered leather, and you pause to observe how the bands lie against one another. They are not perfectly aligned. A slight shift has occurred over time, causing one cord on the left side to sit tighter than its neighbors. This is a common thing, a natural result of gravity and the slow settling of fibers, and you note it with the calm recognition of a task that is neither urgent nor worrying. Before you begin any work with the lacing, you take the soft, squirrel hair brush from the tray of tools and hold it lightly between your thumb and forefinger. The bristles are pale brown and very fine, each one tapering to a delicate point, and they whisper against your palm as you test their give. You bring the brush to the uppermost band of the shikoro and start at the center, drawing the bristles gently across the silk cords in the direction of their weave, from the top of the crisscross down to where the cord disappears into the hole. The dust that has settled into the fibers lifts away in a barely visible haze, catching the lantern light for an instant before vanishing into the still air. You move the brush in long, smooth strokes, never pressing hard, letting the tips of the bristles do all the work. The sound is a soft, continuous shush that seems to spread outward through the room, blending with the quiet hiss of the oil flames. You work your way around the entire collar, one band at a time, shifting the shikoro in your lap so that each section comes under the light. The silk reveals its true color as the dust is removed, a complex indigo that shifts toward gray in the shadows and toward a muted blue where the lantern strikes it directly. Tiny fibers, loosened by age, stand up from the surface of the cords, and the brush smooths them down again with each pass. You pause only to clean the brush against a scrap of linen, tapping the handle lightly against the edge of the waste bowl to free the accumulated dust, then resume the slow circuit. By the time you return to the starting point, the entire lacework looks fresher, the cords somehow more defined, as though they have been drawn with a finer pen. Now you set the brush aside and turn the shikoro over to examine its underside, where the lacing passes through the leather bands and is knotted on the interior. The knots are small and tight, each one a flat square that lies flush against the lacquer, and they are arranged in neat rows that follow the curve of the collar. You run a fingertip over them, feeling the slight texture of twisted silk, and notice that one knot, located on the third band down, has loosened just enough to create a small loop of slack cord. The loop is no wider than a grain of rice, but you know that if left unattended, it will grow with time and cause the band to shift out of alignment. You reach for the wooden needle, a slender tool carved from a single piece of boxwood and polished by years of use until it gleams like amber. The needle is blunt at one end and tapered at the other, with a narrow eye drilled through the thicker section. You thread a length of spare indigo cord through the eye, choosing a piece from a small bundle kept in a cloth pouch on the shelf. This cord matches the original in color and thickness, having been dyed in the same vat and twisted by the same hands, and you test its strength by pulling it gently between your fingers before beginning. The loosened knot sits just above your left knee as you hold the shikoro in your lap. You use the blunt end of the needle to work the existing knot free, teasing the silk strands apart without cutting them, inching the slack back through the hole until the cord lies smooth and even once more. The old silk is dry but still pliable, and it yields to your patient nudges. Each tiny movement of the needle guided by a touch so light it barely disturbs the surrounding threads. When the slack is fully withdrawn, you retighten the knot by pulling the cord through in a fresh sequence, crossing left over right, then under, then over again, until a new square knot sits snugly against the leather. You trim the excess cord with the small knife, leaving a tail no longer than a fingernail, and tuck the tail under the neighboring lace where it will lie hidden. A second knot nearby catches your attention, not because it is loose, but because the cord itself has begun to fray where it rubs against the edge of the hole. The fray is small, just a few broken filaments that have lifted away from the main twist, but it is the kind of imperfection that can unravel further if not secured. You take the knife, a blade so sharp that it parts the silk without any sound, and trim the frayed strands flush with the surface. The cut is clean, leaving a smooth cross-section that catches the light like a tiny drop of water. You then open a small ceramic pot of rice glue, lifting the lid with a soft pop, and dip the tip of a bamboo sliver into the translucent paste. The glue has the consistency of thin honey, and it carries a mild, starchy scent that reminds you of fresh mochi steaming in the castle kitchens far below. You apply the glue to the trimmed cord with the same precision you used for the knot, touching it only to the very tip of the silk, then withdraw the sliver and wait. The glue begins to dry almost immediately, its moist sheen fading to a matte finish, and you hold the shikoro perfectly still in your lap while it sets. The waiting is not idle. It is a part of the work, a pause during which you observe the rest of the neck guard, noting the even spacing of the remaining cords and the way the lacquer on the bands reflects the lantern glow in a sequence of soft highlights. Your breathing slows to a near standstill, and the room feels suspended in the same motionless moment, the flames frozen in their glass chimneys, the shadows fixed on the walls. When the glue has dried, you test the repair with a gentle prod of the needle, finding it firm. The cord now looks whole, its fray sealed into a smooth cap that blends with the surrounding twist. You return the glue pot to the shelf and wipe the bamboo sliver clean on the linen scrap, then settle back onto your cushion to continue. The relacing that lies ahead is a longer process, one that will occupy your hands for a substantial stretch of the evening. You have noticed, as you inspected the collar, that the entire left section of the shikoro could benefit from being retensioned. Several cords have stretched slightly over the years, and the bands they connect no longer sit with perfect, uniform spacing. You decide to unlace and relace each cross in that section, working from the top band down to the lowest, a task that will involve perhaps 20 individual cords. It is not a decision you make with any reluctance. Rather, it comes to you naturally as the next logical step in the evening's rhythm. You begin by loosening the first cord, the one that connects the top band to the second at the far left edge. Using the needle, you pull the knot free and draw the silk out of the 2 holes it passes through, leaving the band unbound. The cord comes away in your hand, a long, undulating strand that retains the memory of its former twists, and you lay it across your palm to examine it. The color is even, the twist tight, and there are no signs of wear beyond the expected softening. You set it aside and pick up the spare cord you have already cut to length, dipping its tip in a tiny amount of beeswax to stiffen it for threading. The relacing follows a pattern that is ancient and simple. You push the wax tip through the lower hole from the outside, drawing the cord inward until a small tail remains, then guide it upward through the corresponding hole in the band above. The cord crosses the gap in a diagonal line, and you bring it back down through the next hole over, creating a cross that sits flush against the lacquer. You repeat this motion hole after hole, each cross identical to the last, yet your mind does not grow tired of the repetition. Instead, the pattern becomes a kind of meditation, your fingers finding the holes without conscious guidance, the needle passing through with a soft, scratching whisper that marks the steady pulse of the work. The lanterns burn on, and the room remains quiet, and the night deepens beyond the window in its slow, unnoticed way. You tighten each cord as you go, pulling it just enough to bring the two bands into firm contact without straining the silk or warping the leather. The tension is judged by feel, a delicate balance that you've learned over many evenings, and you check it by pressing gently on the band and watching how it springs back. Too tight, and the lacquer might crack under the pressure. Too loose, and the collar will sag. Your fingers find the right point each time. A sweet spot where the cord hums slightly if plucked, and the band sits flush against its neighbor. When a cord is in place, you tie a new square knot on the inside, trim the tail, and move to the next. The sequence of actions thread, cross, pull, knot, trim repeats itself in a gentle loop, but you vary the details each time to suit the particular cord. Some cords require a little extra beeswax because their fibers have roughened. Others are slightly shorter and demand a different angle of approach with the needle. These small variations keep your attention anchored in the present, preventing the work from becoming mechanical. You notice how the indigo of the new cord stands out against the faded old lace, a slight difference in shade that will even out with time and dust, and you accept the contrast as part of the armor's living history. Nothing here is meant to look brand new. It is meant to be sound. The brush comes back into your hands intermittently as you pause the lacing to clean the dust that the handling has stirred up. A fine powder of old silk and leather fibers has settled into the crevices between the bands, and you sweep it away with the same patient strokes, tilting the shikoro to let the debris fall into the waste bowl. The dust sparkles for a moment as it passes through the lantern beam, a tiny constellation of floating motes, then it is gone, and you continue. You are perhaps halfway through the section when you find the fray you had been half expecting all along. It is on a cord near the center, where the neck guard bends most sharply, and the silk rubs against the rim of the helmet during storage. The fray is larger than the first one, a full quarter of the cord's thickness worn away to a fluffy, disorganized fringe. You stop at once, setting the needle down, and examine the damage with the same calm attention you would give to a painting or a passage of calligraphy. The fibers are intact at the core, only the outer twist has unraveled. It can be saved with a careful trim and a seal of glue, just as you did before, but the repair will require more glue and a longer drying time because of the area involved. You take the small knife, and with the shikoro braced against your knee to keep it steady, you pare away the frayed fibers in tiny increments, rotating the cord slightly after each cut to follow its spiral. The knife leaves a smooth, tapered surface behind, and you blow a soft stream of air across it to clear the loose particles. Then you open the rice glue pot again and, using a slightly wider bamboo sliver this time, you apply a thin coat of the paste all around the trim section, covering it completely. The glue sits on the silk like a clear varnish, and you hold the cord away from its neighbors with the tip of the needle so that it does not stick to anything while it dries. The drying takes longer this time, and you settle into a deeper stillness, your hands resting on the shikoro, your eyes fixed on the small, glossy patch. The lantern on your left has begun to burn with a slightly shorter flame, its oil level dropping by a measure you could gauge if you needed to, but you do not. The room's temperature has fallen a few degrees, enough that you notice the coolness on the back of your neck, and you adjust the collar of your kimono with a small, unconscious gesture before returning your full attention to the glue. The minutes pass in a quiet procession, each one identical to the last, and the glue slowly transforms from wet to matte to hard, binding the silk fibers into a unified surface that will resist further wear. When the glue is set, you test it with a gentle press of your fingernail and find it solid. You then resume the relacing, picking up the needle and the spare cord where you left off, and continue the pattern around the curve of the collar. The repaired cord now disappears into the sequence, its glue patch hidden on the inside where it will not be seen, and the neck guard begins to regain its even, balanced shape. The bands sit parallel now, Their spacing a consistent finger's width from top to bottom, and the silk crosses form a continuous chain of indigo diamonds that march around the circumference with a quiet, orderly grace. The final cords are laced and knotted, and you sit back to look at the whole shikoro. You rotate it slowly in your hands, checking each knot, each cross, each gap. The tension is uniform throughout. The lacquer on the bands is clean. The silk lies flat and smooth. The repair sites are invisible unless one knows exactly where to look, and even then they blend into the general texture of age. The neck guard looks as it should, a sturdy, elegant collar that will hang from the helmet and protect the warrior's neck, its cord strong enough to hold for another generation of service. You rise to your knees and lift the shikoro back toward the armor rack, guiding it onto its pegs at the base of the helmet. It slides into place with a satisfying muffled click as the wooden pins settle into their sockets. The neck guard now fans out from the helmet in its proper spread, the 5 bands overlapping in a smooth cascade, the indigo lacing dark against the black lacquer. You adjust the alignment by nudging the lowest band slightly to the right, a movement of less than a finger's width, and then withdraw your hands. The helmet and its collar are now complete, a matched pair that crowns the armor stand with a quiet authority. You lower yourself back onto the cushion and let your hands rest on your thighs, palms up, fingers relaxed. The brush, the needle, the knife, the glue pot, and the bundle of spare cord lie in neat order around you, each tool ready for its next turn. The lanterns continue to cast their twin circles of warm light, and the shadows on the walls remain as still as painted things. The night has moved deeper into its course, though you have not marked its passing, and the only evidence of time is the reduced height of the oil in the lantern wells and the deep, settled silence that now fills every corner of the room. You breathe in, then out, feeling the air move through you with the same gentle rhythm that has guided your hands all evening. The silk cords are tied, the dust is brushed away, and the fray is sealed. The neck guard rests in its place, smooth and even, holding the quiet of the keep within its lacquered bands. You are ready for the next piece. The mempo hangs from its small hook on the armor rack's upright post, suspended just below the throat guard and above the chest plate, where it has waited since you last touched it. You reach forward and lift it away with both hands, one supporting the chin and the other cradling the back, feeling the cool weight of the forged iron settle into your palms. The mask is shaped to cover the lower half of a face, from the bridge of the nose down to the point of the chin, with a generous mouth opening and 2 narrow eye slits that remain empty and dark. Its surface carries a deep russet tone, the color of autumn leaves after they have dried, achieved through layers of lacquer applied over hammered metal and then rubbed back to a soft, matte luster. You lower the mempo into your lap, resting it on a folded square of clean linen that you spread across your cushion, and the lantern light falls upon its contours with a gentle, searching glow. The nose is prominent, a sculpted ridge that curves outward and then dips, with fine engraved lines around the nostrils, suggesting the wrinkles of an expression caught between composure and a faint, knowing smile. The cheeks sweep back in smooth planes that catch the light on their highest points, while the chin tapers to a neat, rounded point. Along the sides, small loops of iron wait to receive the silk cords that will tie the mask to the wearer's face, and below the chin, a narrow flange curves inward to protect the throat. It is a beautiful, severe object, a face that is not a face, and it holds a quiet presence in your lap, as if it were listening to the silence. You begin by turning the mask over in your hands, inspecting every angle with a slow, deliberate rotation. The interior is unlined, showing the bare iron that has been blackened by years of contact with oil and skin, its surface darker and rougher than the outside. You run a fingertip along the inner curve, tracing the hollow of the cheek, the depression of the chin, the sharp edge of the eye slit, and you feel no dampness or rust. The metal is dry and cool, scented faintly with the ghost of old clove oil. A thin line of darker patina rings the mouth opening, a natural discoloration from breath and time, and you make a mental note to address it later with a gentle rubbing of paste. The inspection requires no hurry, and you find yourself pausing often, holding the mask up toward the lantern, so that the flame's glow can probe the crevices. With the inspection complete, You set the mempo back on the linen and turn toward the small ceramic dish of powdered whetstone that sits beside your cushion, alongside the pot of clove-scented oil and the deer leather. You open the dish and, using the tip of a clean bamboo sliver, transfer a small mound of the grey powder onto a flat, smooth stone that serves as a mixing palette. The pile is no larger than a lentil, but you know from experience that it will be more than enough for the entire mask. Next, you unstopper the oil pot and let a single drop fall from the lip onto the powder, then another drop beside it. The oil pools for a moment, amber and clear, before it begins to soak into the grey dust, darkening it to the color of wet slate. You take the bamboo sliver and stir the mixture slowly, folding the oil into the powder with a circular motion that gradually transforms the separate elements into a uniform paste, smooth and glossy, with the consistency of thick cream. The paste carries a faint, mineral scent underlaid by the spice of clove, and you draw it toward you on the palette, testing its texture by pressing the flat of the sliver against it and lifting away. A fine, silky peak forms and then subsides, indicating that the paste is well proportioned. If it were too dry, it would crumble and scratch. Too wet, it would slide across the metal without cutting the surface oxidation. Satisfied, you dip the tip of your right index finger into the paste, coating it with a thin, even layer that feels cool and slightly gritty against the skin, and you lean over the mempo to begin. The first touch falls upon the right cheek, just below the cheekbone, where the iron curves outward in a gentle swell. You start a series of small, overlapping circles, each one no wider than a thumbprint, moving your finger with a light, constant pressure that keeps the paste in contact with the metal at all points. The motion is slow enough that you can feel the microscopic texture of the iron through the paste, a faint, regular grain that has been left by the hammer and file of the original armourer. As the circles accumulate, the paste begins to change color, picking up a thin burden of oxidized iron and darkening from pale gray to a cloudy charcoal. You work the area until the paste turns nearly black, then you pause to wipe it away with a soft, dry cloth, revealing the metal beneath. The russet lacquer shows a deeper richness now, a subdued gleam that catches the lantern light and holds it like a still pool. You dip your finger again, renewing the paste, and continue the polishing across the same cheek, expanding outward from the initial spot to cover the entire plane from the nose to the edge. The rhythm of the circles is hypnotic, each set of rotations blending into the next, and your hand moves with a steady, unhurried pace that seems to match the slow burn of the oil in the lanterns. The metal warms under your touch, a faint, pleasant heat that passes from the iron into your fingertip, and you imagine the mask absorbing the oil, drinking it into the microscopic pores of the lacquer, sealing itself against the damp air of future seasons. When the right cheek is done, you buff it with a clean section of the deer leather, using long, sweeping strokes that follow the contour from the nose outward to the edge. The leather produces a soft, singing friction, a low hum that is barely audible, and it leaves behind a flawless, semi-matte surface that glows rather than shines. You turn the mask slightly and repeat the entire process on the left cheek, dipping, circling, wiping, and buffing with the same attentive precision until both sides of the face hold the same quiet, russet depth. The nose, with its intricate wrinkles and sharp ridge, requires a more delicate approach. You take a fresh bamboo sliver and use its wedge-shaped tip to transfer a tiny bead of paste into the engraved lines, one by one, dropping it exactly into the grooves. Then you take a small, tightly rolled piece of soft linen, about the size of a rice grain, and use it to rub the paste along each wrinkle with a careful back-and-forth motion that travels from the bridge to the nostril. The linen roll darkens quickly, and you replace it with a fresh one every few strokes, ensuring that no old paste remains to scratch the metal. The wrinkles gradually emerge from their faint state, becoming more defined, the lines deepening as the surrounding lacquer takes on a richer tone. You lean close to the mask, your face illuminated by the twin lanterns, and the scent of clove and stone fills your nostrils with a clean, sharp fragrance. The eye slits, narrow crescents that curve upward at the outer ends, receive their own share of attention. You clean their inner edges with the tip of a soft pigeon feather, one of several kept in a slim wooden case on the shelf. The feather is grey and downy, its barbs so fine they feel like breath against your skin, and you twirl it gently inside each slit to dislodge the traces of polishing paste that have crept into the crevices. The feather emerges with a faint grey smudge at its tip, which you wipe onto the linen scrap before repeating the action. The empty sockets beyond the slits remain dark, hollows that the lantern light cannot penetrate, and they seem to gather the amber glow around their rims without releasing it, like small wells of shadow. The mouth opening, a wide, slightly downturned gash that reveals the interior of the mask, demands a similar treatment. You moisten a fresh feather with a single drop of oil and run it along the cut edge of the iron, feeling for any roughness or burr. The edge is smooth, but the feather's delicate touch confirms it, and you follow the entire perimeter with the same slow, twirling motion, cleaning the metal and leaving behind a whisper-thin film of protective oil. The mouth, like the eyes, holds its own silence, a void that seems to promise speech but delivers only stillness, and you pause to look at it for a long, contemplative moment before moving on. The chin, a pointed, sculpted prominence, becomes the focus next. You apply fresh paste to your fingertip and begin a new series of circles, starting at the very tip and moving upward along the central ridge. The chin surface is small and convex, requiring you to adjust the angle of your hand frequently, and you do so without thought, your wrist rotating smoothly as if guided by an internal memory of the shape. The paste darkens here as well, absorbing the thin layer of oxidation that has dulled the metal, and when you wipe it away, the chin gleams with a subdued antique light that matches the cheeks and nose. You buff it with the deer leather, using short overlapping strokes that follow the vertical line of the face, and the mask begins to look whole again, its separate parts united by a uniform finish. The small loops on the sides where the tying cords will pass are cleaned with the oiled feather and then polished with a scrap of leather wrapped around the bamboo sliver to reach the inner surfaces. You check each loop for any sign of hairline cracks, holding the mask up to the lantern and peering through the iron circle, and find them solid and true. The loops are simple, functional forms that serve no decorative purpose, yet they are finished with the same care as the face itself, and you handle them with the respect that all parts of the armor command. As you work, the lantern on your right gives a soft, sudden flicker, a sputter that makes the shadows jump and then settle. You glance at it and see that the wick has developed a small glowing ember as its tip, a sign that it will need trimming soon. For now, the flame regains its steadiness, and you return your gaze to the mask. The flicker has left a brief after-image in your vision, a ghost of light that dances across the iron cheek and then fades, and you find yourself studying the way the empty eye sockets seem to collect the deep amber glow, holding it for a fraction of a second longer than the surrounding metal. The illusion is a trick of the concave shape, of the way the hollows trap the light and refuse to release it, and it gives the mask a momentary appearance of sentience, as if something were looking out from behind the iron. The impression passes quickly, leaving only the calm, polished surface, and you continue your work without any change in your steady rhythm. The reverse side of the mask, the interior that rests against the wearer's face, requires no paste but a simple wiping with a cloth lightly dampened in clean water. You dip a corner of the linen into a small bowl of fresh water that you fetched earlier from the shelf, wring it out until it is merely moist, and pass it over the blackened iron in long, straight strokes. The cloth picks up a faint, dark residue, a mixture of old oil and fine dust, and you rinse it in the bowl, watching the water cloud slightly before continuing. The interior is not meant to be seen, but it must be clean and free of any substance that might irritate the skin, and you treat it with the same methodical care you have given to the outward face. When the wiping is complete, you dry the interior with a separate cloth, patting it rather than rubbing to avoid leaving lint, and then leave the mask open to the air for a short while so that any remaining moisture can evaporate. During this pause, you settle back onto your heels and let your hands rest on your thighs, palms up, fingers loosely curled. The mempo lies before you, face up, its polished cheeks reflecting the lanterns in twin, distorted points of light, its eyes dark and deep. The room's silence wraps around you, a silence that has grown thicker with each hour, and you can hear, very faintly, the distant call of a night bird from the forest beyond the castle walls, a sound so soft it might be only memory. Your breathing has become so quiet and regular that it merges with the whisper of the flames, and for a few moments you simply exist in the presence of the mask, asking nothing, expecting nothing. The paste on the palette has dried slightly at its edges, forming a thin, crumbly ring, and you scrape it back toward the center with the bamboo sliver, adding a tiny fresh drop of oil to restore its texture. The renewed paste glistens, and you dip your finger into it once more, turning your attention to the final areas, the flange under the chin, and the narrow strips of metal between the mouth opening and the eyes. These surfaces are small and awkwardly shaped, and you polish them with the tip of your little finger using a dabbing circular motion that is a variation on your usual method. The flange is thin and slightly flexible, bending under pressure but never yielding, and you support it from behind with your other hand while you work. The paste blackens quickly here, picking up a heavier load of oxidation, and you wipe it away and reapply twice before the iron shows the same even tone as the rest of the mask. The final buffing of the entire mempo is a ritual that you savor without naming it as such. You take the deer leather, now warm and supple from your earlier handling, and begin a long sweeping pass across the forehead area, down the nose, over the cheeks, and along the chin, a single continuous stroke that unites all the separate polishing efforts into one cohesive gleam. The leather sings its soft, low hum, and the mask responds by giving up its dullness entirely, transforming into a thing of quiet, russet beauty. The wrinkles around the nose stand clear and sharp, the cheeks hold a deep, liquid glow, the eyes remain dark and unfathomable, and the whole face seems to hover on the edge of expression without ever crossing into it. You lift the mempo and turn it toward the lanterns one last time, checking for any missed spot, any dull patch, any smudge of paste trapped in a crevice. The light slides over the surface without interruption, and you nod slowly, a small private gesture of completion that no one else will witness. The mask is ready to return to its hook on the armor rack, but you hold it for a few moments longer, feeling the warmth it has retained from your hands, tracing the familiar contours with your eyes. It is a face that has guarded warriors in sun and storm, a face that has stared out at battlefields and temple courtyards, and now it rests in your lap, silent and polished, a keeper of its own long history. You rise to your knees and reach forward, guiding the mempo back onto its hook beneath the throat guard. The hook catches the loop at the back of the mask with a soft metallic click, and the face hangs there, aligned with the helmet and neck guard above, the chest plate below. The armor stand is beginning to look more complete now, each piece attended to and set in its proper place, and the lantern light falls upon the whole assembly with a warm, encompassing glow. You lower yourself back onto the cushion and let your hands come to rest, the tools arrayed around you in their careful order, the room still and silent as the night deepens beyond the high stone walls. The paste on the palette has dried completely, a faint grey crust that you will clean away later. The feather lies in its box. The water bowl holds a slight cloudiness that speaks of work completed. The mempo's empty eyes continue to collect the amber light, steady and watchful, and you meet their gaze for a moment before letting your own eyes close briefly, feeling the slow, heavy pull of the quiet hour. There is more to do, more pieces to polish, but for now the mask is done and the room holds its peace. The chest plate hangs at the center of the armor rack, a broad, curving shell of iron and lacquer that forms the torso's protective core. It is the largest single piece in the room, and its presence anchors the entire assembly, drawing the eye inward from the helmet above and the shoulder boards to either side. You shift in your cushion to face it squarely, letting your knees settle into a comfortable width, and you study the do with the same patient attention you have given to every piece before it. The plate is composed of horizontal bands, each one a strip of hammered iron shaped to follow the contours of a chest and back. Their surface is coated in the same deep russet lacquer that colors the mempo's cheeks. Silk braids of dark ochre separate the bands, running in parallel lines that curve around the body of the armor like the ribs of some patient iron animal. You reach out and place your palm flat against the center of the chest plate, feeling the cool, solid mass of it, the slight convexity that would deflect a blow outward and away. The lacquer is smooth and unbroken, though your fingertips detect a faint, regular texture where the underlying metal was hammered to shape centuries ago, a subtle ripple that no amount of polishing will ever remove. This texture is part of the armor's nature, the fingerprint of its maker, and you accept it with the same quiet regard you would give to the grain of old wood. Your hand lingers for a moment longer, absorbing the temperature of the iron, then you withdraw and begin the work of freeing the dew from its mounting pegs. The chest plate is secured to the rack by a series of leather straps that pass through bronze buckles on either side, linking the front and back halves together. You start at the left flank, lifting the strap's loose end away from the buckle's tongue and sliding it back through the metal loop with a soft, dry whisper of hide against hide. The strap is dark brown and slightly stiff, its surface marked with a fine network of creases that speak of many tightenings and loosenings over the years. You work the tongue free, then move to the next strap above it, and the next, until the entire left side hangs open. The right side follows, your fingers moving with a practiced economy that requires no conscious direction, and soon the chest plate is held only by the topmost leather loops that pass over the rack's wooden shoulders. You lift the dew gently upward, clearing the pegs, and lower it onto the clean tatami mat you've spread across the floor in front of you. The dew lies before you now, a great curved shell split into two halves connected by a leather hinge at the back. You separate the halves slightly, opening the armor like a book, and lay them flat so that the interior faces upward. The inside is lined with soft, smoke-tanned leather dyed a deep umber, its surface worn to a velvety smoothness in the areas that would press against the wearer's shoulders and hips. You run your hand across this lining, feeling for any thin spots or tears, and find it whole and supple, the stitching that secures it to the iron bands still tight and even. The scent of old leather rises from the interior, a clean, dry fragrance tinged with the ghost of wood smoke from the tanning pits, and it mingles with the clove oil and the stone dust to create a layered atmosphere that is unique to this room and this hour. The silk braids that separate the iron bands demand your attention next. There are 7 of them on the front plate, each one a tightly twisted cord as thick as your little finger. Their color a muted ochre that shifts toward gold where the lantern light catches it directly. You take the squirrel hair brush and begin at the topmost braid, sweeping the bristles along its length from one edge of the plate to the other, moving with the twist rather than against it. The dust that has settled into the silk fibers lifts in a faint, pale haze and drifts toward the floor, and the braid's true color emerges gradually. A warm, earthy gold that seems to hold a memory of sunlight within its threads. You clean each braid in turn, working downward in a steady progression, and the brush makes its soft, continuous shush against the silk, a sound that has become as familiar to you as your own breathing. When the brushing is complete, you inspect each braid more closely, running it between your thumb and forefinger to feel for any looseness or fray. The silk is old but still strong, its twist tight and springy, and it yields slightly under pressure before returning to its original shape. One braid, the 4th from the top, shows a slight flattening where it has pressed against the wooden rack for a long period, and you spend a few minutes working it with your fingers, rolling the cord back and forth until the fibers relax and regain their roundness. The process is slow and repetitive, your fingers moving in a gentle, kneading motion, and it requires no thought, only patience and a steady touch. When the braid is restored, you smooth it flat against the iron band and move on. The leather straps and buckles that close the sides of the dew lie spread across the mat, and you gather them together, laying them out in a neat row so that each one is visible. There are 6 straps on each side, 12 in total, each cut from a single piece of thick cowhide and stitched with waxed linen thread at the point where it attaches to the iron. The straps vary in width, the ones at the chest being broader and more heavily reinforced, the ones near the waist narrower and more flexible. You pick up the first strap, the lowest on the left side, and fold it back to examine the stitching. The thread is pale against the dark leather, its wax coating still intact, and the holes show no sign of tearing or stretching. You flex the strap gently, bending it first one way and then the other, feeling the resistance of the hide and listening for any crackling sound that would indicate dryness. The leather bends smoothly, its creases deepening and then disappearing, and you set it aside with a small nod of satisfaction. The next strap, however, feels slightly stiff, its surface harder and less yielding than the others. You hold it close to the lantern and see that the hide has begun to lose its natural oils, the grain rising in tiny, pale lines that resemble a dry riverbed. This is a common condition, especially in the cooler months when the air draws moisture from everything it touches, and the remedy is simple. You open a small earthenware pot of deer fat, rendered and purified until it is white and odorless, and you scoop a minute amount onto the tip of your finger. The fat melts at the touch of your skin, becoming a clear, thin oil that you spread across the strap's surface with a light circular motion. The leather drinks it in at once, darkening slightly and softening under your hand, and the tiny cracks in the grain begin to close as if the hide were healing itself. You work the fat into every part of the strap, including the edges and the area around the stitching, then wipe away any excess with a clean cloth before it can attract dust. The strap now feels supple and alive, its natural flexibility restored, and you place it with the others before moving on. Each strap receives the same examination and, where needed, the same light dressing of deer fat. The buckles are bronze, cast in a simple rectangular shape with a central tongue, their surfaces darkened by a fine patina that ranges from deep brown to a faint greenish tint where the metal has reacted with the air over many decades. You polish each buckle with a dry scrap of linen, rubbing the bronze until it glows with a subdued antique sheen that reveals the subtle variations in the metal's color. The tongues move freely in their sockets, and you test each one by pressing it down and releasing it, watching it spring back with a faint, metallic click. One buckle, on the upper right strap, has a tongue that is slightly bent, perhaps from a careless tightening in the distant past. You straighten it with a gentle pressure of your thumb, working slowly so as not to stress the bronze, and it returns to its proper alignment without complaint. The metal bands themselves, the horizontal plates of iron that make up the body of the do, now lie exposed and ready for cleaning. You take a soft cotton cloth, fold it into a pad and moisten it with a single drop of clove oil, spreading the oil evenly by rubbing the cloth against itself. Then you begin to wipe the first band, starting at the center of the chest and moving outward toward the left edge, following the horizontal grain of the metal with long, even strokes. The cloth glides over the lacquer with a faint smooth resistance that tells you the surface is sound, and it leaves behind a thin, protective film that catches the lantern light in a series of soft, parallel highlights. You wipe each band in turn, working downward from the top of the chest plate to the bottom, and then repeat the process on the back plate, turning the armor over on the mat to access its other side. The back plate is simpler than the front, lacking the decorative rivets and the slight central ridge that gives the chest its shape, but it is no less carefully made. The same horizontal bands, the same ochre braids, the same deep russet lacquer cover its surface, and you clean it with the same methodical attention, your cloth moving in the same long horizontal strokes. The lantern light falls differently on the back, casting deeper shadows into the curve where the spine would rest, and you tilt the plate slightly to ensure that every part catches the blow. The oiled cloth darkens as it picks up the thin film of dust and old polish, and you change to a fresh section of fabric halfway through, folding the used side inward so that it does not contaminate the clean surface. When the wiping is complete, you turn your attention to the small rivets that secure the leather lining to the iron bands on the interior. These rivets are made of copper, their heads flattened and polished, and they are set in a regular pattern that follows the curve of each band. You count them as you inspect them, not from any need to tally, but from a natural impulse to measure and confirm 12 on the top band, 14 on the second, 16 on the third. Each rivet is tight in its hole, showing no wiggle or lift, and you clean around them with the tip of a dry cloth, removing any trace of oil that might have crept inside. The copper heads gleam softly against the dark leather, a constellation of small, warm lights that mirror the lantern flames in miniature. The leather hinge that connects the front and back plates of the shoulder requires a careful examination, for it bears the weight of the entire armor when it is worn and must remain strong and flexible. You open the hinge fully, laying the two halves of the do flat, and inspect the double row of stitching that secures the leather to the iron. The stitches are small and even, each one crossing the leather's edge at the same angle, and the thread shows no fray or wear. You apply a tiny amount of deer fat to the hinge itself, working it into the fold with your fingertips until the leather bends as easily as a piece of heavy cloth. The hinge creaks once, a soft leathery sound, and then falls silent under your touch. The do is now clean, supple, and whole, its straps dressed and its buckles polished, its silk braids brushed and its lacquer gleaming with a quiet, understated gloss. You bring the two halves together, aligning the edges so that the armor resumes its shell-like form, and you fasten the center straps loosely to hold it closed while you lift it back toward the rack. The weight is considerable, a solid, balanced mass that requires both hands and a steady stance, and you rise from your cushion with the do cradled against your chest, feeling its coolness pressed through the fabric of your kimono. You guide it onto the wooden pegs, lowering it gently until it seats itself with a soft, definite thud, and then you tighten the side straps one by one, drawing them snug against the rack's frame. The buckles engage with a series of quiet clicks, and the do stands once more at the center of the assembly, its curve smooth and its surface glowing in the amber light. You step back, or rather you lean back on your heels, and let your eyes travel over the armor stand from top to bottom. The helmet with its polished dome and its neat, even neck guard, the face mask with its deep russet cheeks and its dark, empty eyes, the throat guard beneath it, and now the chest plate, broad and solid, its ochre braids catching the light like threads of old gold. The armor is becoming more than a collection of separate pieces. It is beginning to look like a unified whole, a single figure waiting in the lantern glow. The silence of the room seems to gather around it, a stillness that has weight and texture, and you breathe it in, letting it fill your lungs and then release it slowly. Your tools lie scattered around the cushion in their usual order: the cotton cloths, the deer leather, the brush, the oil pot, the deer fat, the linen scraps, the bowl of water now faintly clouded. You gather them toward you, tidying the workspace without rising, wiping the palette clean of dried paste, and placing the stopper back in the oil pot. The lanterns continue to burn, their flames a little shorter than when you first lit them, their oil wells a little emptier, and the room's temperature has settled into a steady coolness that you no longer notice. The high window shows a square of black silk now, the stars hidden by a thin veil of cloud, and the night bird's call has fallen silent. You fold your hands in your lap and sit for a while, simply looking at the armor, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a task completed, and the calm anticipation of the tasks that remain. The do stands ready, its leather bindings supple and strong, its iron bands clean and protected, and you know that it will hold its place on the rack through the remaining hours of darkness, silent and still, until the first grey light of dawn touches the window and the castle stirs to life far below. The shoulder guards lie side by side on the clean tatami mat to your left, where you placed them earlier after lifting them free of the armor rack's crossbar. They are called sod, and they are large, rectangular panels built of many small lacquered scales laced together with silk cord in a pattern that repeats across their entire surface. Each panel is nearly as long as your arm from shoulder to fingertip, and they rest now with their upper edges aligned, their scales overlapping like the feathers of a bird that has folded its wings for the night. The silk lacing that holds them together runs in horizontal rows, alternating colors in a faded sequence of pale cream, dusty indigo, and a thin line of gold that catches the lantern glow with a soft, intermittent shimmer. You reach down and lift the left shoulder guard first, cradling it across both palms and raising it into the full light. The scales are small, no larger than the nail of your thumb, cut from hardened leather and coated in the same deep russet lacquer that colors the chest plate and the face mask. They overlap from top to bottom in a staggered arrangement, each upper scale covering the top third of the one below, so that the entire panel presents a surface that is both flexible and dense. You turn the sewed over and inspect the reverse side, where a backing of heavy indigo fabric supports the scales, and the lacing passes through in neat, parallel rows of knots. The fabric is sturdy and whole, It's weaved tight and unbroken, and it carries the faint, dry scent of old silk and stored air. You begin by checking each scale individually, a process that will take a substantial portion of the hour. Starting at the upper left corner, you pinch the first scale between your thumb and forefinger and give it a gentle lateral tug to test the tension of its lacing. The scale moves a fraction and then stops, held firm by the cord that passes through two small holes drilled near its upper edge and crosses behind the fabric to the neighboring scale. Satisfied, you release it and move to the next, then the next, working your way across the top row in a slow, deliberate progression. The scales feel cool and smooth under your fingertips, their edges slightly rounded from years of rubbing against one another, and they make a faint, dry clicking sound when you release them, a sound that is softer than a whisper and as regular as a slow heartbeat. You find the first loose scale midway down the third row, a small plate that shifts noticeably under your touch and shows a fraction more gap at its lower edge than its neighbors. You set the sewed down on the mat, scale side up, and reach for the wooden needle and a length of spare silk cord from the bundle on your shelf. The loosened cord is an indigo one, and you can see where it has stretched over time, its fibers elongated and thin where they pass through the holes. You use the needle to draw the old cord out carefully, pulling it through the fabric backing without disturbing the surrounding scales, and then thread a fresh length of cord through the same holes. The new silk is slightly brighter than the old, a deeper indigo that will fade with time, and you pull it snug, bringing the scale back into tight alignment with its neighbors before tying a flat knot on the reverse side and trimming the tail. The scale now sits firm and even, its gap closed, and you press it gently to confirm the repair before moving on. There are 3 more loose scales scattered across the panel, and you attend to each in the same way, unthreading the old cord, threading the new, pulling the tension just so, and tying the knot with a deliberate, patient turn of your fingers. The work is repetitive in its essence, yet no 2 scales are exactly alike in their positioning or the state of their cords, and you find a quiet satisfaction in each small restoration. The lantern light plays over the scales as you work, catching the high points of the lacquer and leaving the recessed overlaps in soft shadow, and the pattern of light and dark shifts with every tiny movement of your hands. When the left sewed is fully checked and its loose cords replaced, you take the squirrel hair brush and sweep the entire panel, starting at the top and drawing the bristles downward in the direction of the scales overlap. The brush removes the thin layer of dust that has settled into the crevices, and the lacquer's deep russet tone emerges more vividly, as though the colors have been washed in a gentle golden light. You clean the reverse side as well, brushing the fabric backing with lighter strokes, and then set the sewed aside on a clean section of the mat while you turn to the right shoulder guard. The right sewed receives the same treatment, the inspection of each scale, the testing of every cord, the discovery of 2 loose plates that require relacing, and the final brushing that lifts away the dust. You notice that the silk lacing on this panel is slightly more faded on the outer edge, the side that would face the sun if the armor were worn outdoors, and the cream-colored cords there are bleached to an almost white shade. The variation is natural, a record of use and exposure, and you make no attempt to correct it, only to ensure that the cords are sound and the scales secure. When the right sewed is complete, you lay it beside the left one and sit back for a moment to survey the pair. They are identical in size and shape, their lacing patterns mirroring each other, their surfaces clean and their scales tight, and they seem to rest on the mat with a calm, balanced presence. The coat, the armored sleeves, hang from the lower arms of the wooden rack, their fabric draping downward in soft brown folds. You rise from your cushion and lift the left sleeve first, unhooking it from its peg and carrying it back to your seat. The coat is made of heavy cotton cloth, dyed a deep, earthy brown, and it is shaped to cover the arm from the shoulder to the wrist. The outer surface is sewn with rows of small iron plates, rectangular and slightly curved, each one connected to its neighbor by a fine chainmail mesh that glitters faintly in the lantern light. The inner surface is plain fabric, smooth and unadorned, with a series of cloth ties that would secure the sleeve to the arm beneath. A leather patch at the elbow is reinforced with extra stitching, and a small lacquered plate guards the back of the hand. You turn the coat inside out, inspecting the fabric for any sign of wear or moth, and find it clean and whole. The stitching at the shoulder and wrist is tight, the threads still holding their original dark brown color. The chainmail, a mesh of tiny iron rings each no wider than a grain of rice, is also intact, though a few rings on the forearm section have developed a faint dusty bloom of surface rust. You take a dry, soft cloth and rub the affected rings gently, one by one, feeling the slight roughness of the rust give way to the smooth, cool metal beneath. The cloth turns a pale orange at the corner, and you fold it inward to contain the dust. When the chainmail is clean, you dab a very small amount of clove oil onto a fresh cloth and pass it lightly over the metal, coating each ring with a protective film so thin it is barely visible. The oil brings out the dark, muted gleam of the iron, and the rings begin to catch the light in a faint, regular shimmer. The small plates sewn into the forearms require a similar cleaning. They are lacquered in the same russet shade as the scales of the sewed, and you white them with a dry cloth, then with a lightly oiled one, moving in short, straight strokes that follow the grain of the metal. The cloth glides over the plates with a soft, smooth friction, and the lacquer deepens slightly, absorbing the oil and taking on a richer, warmer tone. You work your way from the wrist to the elbow, plate by plate, until the entire outer surface of the coat gleams with a uniform, quiet luster. The right sleeve is next, and you bring it down from the rack and settle it across your lap. It matches the left in every detail, the same heavy brown cotton, the same chainmail and plates, the same leather elbow patch. You inspect it, turn it inside out, check the stitching, and clean the chainmail and plates with the same careful sequence of dry cloth and oiled cloth. A small tear in the fabric near the wrist catches your eye, a cut no longer than your smallest fingernail, where the cloth has frayed against the edge of an iron plate. You take the needle and a length of brown silk thread, and you close the tear with a series of tiny, even stitches that pull the edges together without puckering. The thread blends into the fabric almost perfectly, and when you are finished, the repair is nearly invisible. You smooth the fabric flat and set the coatee aside. Now both sleeves lie on the mat beside the shoulder guards, their fabric slightly cool and carrying the scent of clean cotton and clove. You decide to let them air for a short while, a practice you follow whenever the sleeves have been handled and oiled. You rise and carry them to the wooden rack, but instead of hanging them, you drape them over the lower crossbar so that they hang open, their inner surfaces exposed to the still air of the room. The fabric will breathe here, releasing any trapped moisture from the oil and the warmth of your hands, and by the time you return to hang them properly, they will be dry and fresh. You stand for a moment beside the rack, looking at the armor as it now stands. The helmet with its polished dome and even neck guard, the face mask with its deep russet cheeks, the throat guard beneath it, the broad chest plate with its ochre braids, and now the shoulder guards and sleeves arranged nearby, clean and ready. The armor has a presence that is difficult to name, a stillness that seems to gather the lantern light and hold it within the lacquer and silk and iron. The room itself feels heavy with the night, the air thick with the scent of oil and old wood, and the only sound is the steady twin whisper of the lantern flames. You return to your cushion and lower yourself onto it, your knees finding their familiar hollows, your spine straightening without thought. The shoulder guards still lie on the mat, and you reach for the left one, lifting it toward the rack. The sew attaches to the shoulder by means of a broad leather strap that passes over the crossbar and buckles on the far side, and you guide it into place, settling the panel so that it hangs straight and its lacing aligns with the chest plate below. You tighten the strap, test it with a gentle tug, and then repeat the process with the right shoulder guard, adjusting its position slightly so that the two panels hang with perfect symmetry. The sewed now frame the chest plate like a pair of folded wings, their scales overlapping in neat, regular rows, their silk lacing a quiet cascade of faded color. The coat, still airing on the lower crossbar, are ready to be hung. You lift the left sleeve and thread its shoulder loops onto the peg, letting the fabric fall naturally along the rack's wooden arm. The right sleeve follows, and you adjust both so that the chainmail rests evenly and the handguards hang at the same height. The sleeves drape with a relaxed, natural weight, their brown fabric contrasting with the dark iron and lacquer of the other pieces, and they complete the upper portion of the armor, stand in a way that satisfies something deep and unspoken within you. You step back, or rather you lean back on your heels, and let your gaze travel slowly over the entire assembly. The armor is now more than half complete, its upper body fully assembled and gleaming, and it seems to wait in the lantern light with a patient, silent dignity. The shadows cast by the twin flames have shifted slightly as the night has deepened, stretching further across the plastered walls, and the room has grown cooler, though you notice it only as a pleasant, quiet coolness on your cheeks and the backs of your hands. The high window remains a square of deep, featureless darkness, and the castle below is entirely still. You gather the tools that have accumulated around your cushion, the cloths, some dry and some faintly darkened with oil and dust, the brush with its soft, squirrel hair bristles, the needle and spare silk, the oil pot and the deer fat, the small bowl of water that you replace with fresh water from the ewer on the shelf. You arrange them in their usual order, tidying the workspace until it is as neat as it was when you began, and then you pour a small amount of fresh oil into the lantern wells, topping them off so that they will burn steadily through the remaining hours. The flames flicker once at the disturbance and then settle, stronger and brighter than before. You sit again on your cushion, your hands resting palms up on your thighs, and you allow a long, slow breath to fill your lungs and then leave them. The shoulder guards are secure, their scales tight and their silk lacing clean. The sleeves are hung, their fabric aired and their chain-mail gleaming. The work of the evening has passed its midpoint, and the armor stands in the quiet holding its peace, waiting for the next piece. You close your eyes for a moment, not from tiredness but from a sense of deep, calm presence, and listen to the twin lanterns breathe beside you, a pair of steady, golden lungs. The thigh guard, called howdate, hangs from a pair of leather loops on the armor rack's lower crossbar, suspended just below the chest plate's bottom edge. It is an apron of heavy cloth, dark and densely woven, onto which rows of small lacquered tiles have been stitched in vertical columns that overlap like roof shingles. The tiles are made of hardened leather, each one cut into a rectangular shape no larger than a playing card, their surfaces coated in the same deep russet lacquer that covers the rest of the armor. The cloth backing is a muted charcoal grey, its fibers softened by age until it feels almost like felt under your fingertips. You lift the howdate from its loops, supporting its weight with both hands, and carry it to the center of the mat where you spread it flat, tile side up, smoothing the fabric with your palms until it lies without any wrinkles. You kneel beside it and take a moment to survey the layout, 6 vertical columns, each one containing 12 tiles, for a total of 72 individual pieces. The tiles are sewn along their top edges only, leaving their lower portions free to overlap and flex, and the stitching is a continuous line of waxed linen thread that passes through each tile and anchors it to the cloth. You run a finger down the first column, feeling the slight rise and fall of the overlapping edges, the cool smoothness of the lacquer against your skin. The tiles respond with a faint, dry clicking as they settle under your touch, a sound that is delicate and musical, like the distant rustle of bamboo leaves. You begin the inspection by checking each tile for looseness or damage, starting at the upper left corner of the apron and working your way across, then down, row by row. Your thumb and forefinger pinch each tile gently near its stitched edge, giving it a subtle wiggle to test the security of the thread. The first tile is firm, the second equally so, and the third shifts by a hair's width, a movement so small that only your trained fingertips can detect it. You mark the spot in your memory and continue, moving across the entire apron with a patience that has become the rhythm of your evening. By the time you reach the final tile in the lower right corner, you have noted 3 loose tiles and one place where the thread has frayed but not yet broken, a discovery that brings no alarm, only a quiet acknowledgement of work to be done. The needle and linen thread wait in the tray beside your cushion. You thread the needle with a fresh length of waxed linen, the thread passing through the eye with a soft whisper, and you knot the end with a simple loop that you pull tight against your thumbnail. The first loose tile is in the second column, 4th row down, and you turn the howdate over to access the reverse side, where the stitching is visible as a series of small, even dashes across the charcoal cloth. You insert the needle beside the existing stitch, push it through the tile's hole from behind, and draw the thread up and over the tile's top edge before passing it back down through the neighboring hole and into the cloth. The motion repeats 4 times, each pass tightening the tile against the fabric, and then you tie off the thread with a tiny flat knot and trim the excess. The tile now sits snugly against its neighbors, its edge aligned, its surface flush. The second loose tile is repaired in the same manner, and the third, each stitch identical to the last, yet distinct in its own small way, the needle passing through holes that are slightly different in shape and wear. The frayed thread located in the 5th column you address by cutting away the damaged section with the small knife and replacing it with a new length of linen that you splice into the existing line of stitching, overlapping the ends and sewing them down flat. The splice is neat and unobtrusive, blending into the surrounding stitches, and when you are finished, the entire apron is secure once more. With the stitching complete, you turn the Haydate tile side up and take a square of dry silk from the shelf, a piece of fabric so fine and smooth that it seems to have no texture at all. You fold it into a pad and begin to polish the first tile, moving the silk in small circular passes that cover the entire surface from one edge to the other. The silk glides over the lacquer with a friction that is barely perceptible, a gentle silken drag that produces no sound, and the tile begins to glow with a subdued matte luster. You work your way down the column, tile by tile, each one receiving the same number of circles, the same light pressure, the same slow, methodical attention. The silk pad darkens slightly as it picks up the thin film of old oil and dust, and you refold it periodically to expose a clean surface. The polishing continues across all 6 columns, and the room fills with a quiet that is even deeper than before, a stillness that seems to emanate from the Haydate itself as its tiles begin to shine in the lantern light. The flames reflect off each small rectangle, creating a field of soft, scattered highlights that dance and shift as you move. The lacquer's russet color deepens, taking on a warmth that contrasts with the cool charcoal of the cloth beneath, and the apron starts to look less like a piece of armor and more like a carefully crafted textile, a fabric of light and shadow. When every tile has been polished, you lift the hadid and shake it gently once to dislodge any stray particles of dust or silk fiber. The tiles rustle against one another with that same soft clicking sound, a chorus of tiny, percussive notes that fades quickly into the silence. You then carry the apron back to the armor rack and hang it from its leather loops, adjusting the straps so that it drapes evenly, its tiles cascading downward in a smooth, unbroken curtain. The Haydate now hangs below the chest plate, its russet surface catching the lantern light, a quiet complement to the larger pieces above it. The shin guards, called sunite, stand upright at the base of the rack, 2 vertical assemblies of iron and leather that protect the legs from knee to ankle. Each one consists of 3 long, narrow splints of hammered iron, their surfaces lacquered in the same deep russet as the rest of the armor, connected by copper hinges at the sides and secured with leather straps that wrap around the calf. The splints are slightly curved to follow the shape of a leg, and they taper from a wider section at the knee down to a narrower guard at the ankle, where a small curved plate covers the top of the foot. You kneel down and lift the left shin guard first, cradling it in your hands and bringing it back to your cushion, where you rest it against your knee in a position that is both comfortable and stable. The iron splints feel cool and solid through the fabric of your hakamae, and you turn the sunite over to inspect its inner side. The interior is lined with a layer of soft, dark leather that would cushion the leg, and this lining is stitched to the iron along the edges with small, even stitches of brown thread. You press your fingers into the leather, checking for any thin spots or tears, and find it supple and intact, though a faint musty scent rises from it, the smell of leather that has been stored in a cool room for many months. The scent is not unpleasant, merely old, and it mingles with the clove oil and the dust to add another layer to the room's complex atmosphere. You take a dry cotton cloth and wipe the outer surface of each splint, moving the cloth along the vertical grain of the metal in long, straight strokes that travel from the knee end down to the ankle. The lacquer responds with a soft, deepening gloss, and the cloth picks up a thin grey film of dust that you shake into the waste bowl before continuing. The vertical splints are separated by narrow gaps where the copper hinges are visible, and these gaps collect dust more readily than the smooth surfaces. You fold the cloth into a narrow point and run it through each gap, cleaning the inner edges of the iron and the outer faces of the hinges with a gentle back and forth motion. The copper hinges themselves are small and sturdy, each one made from two flat plates joined by a pin, and they are dark with a patina that ranges from deep brown to a faint dusty green. The patina is natural and protective, and you do not seek to remove it, only to clean away any loose corrosion that might have formed. You take a scrap of fine deer leather, cut into a tiny square, and you rub each hinge plate with a light circular motion, polishing the copper just enough to reveal its underlying warm reddish glow. The leather darkens as it works, and you discard it after each hinge, using a fresh piece for the next. The pins that connect the hinge plates are stiff with age, and you decide to apply a drop of clove oil to each one to keep them moving freely. You open the small oil pot, dip the tip of a bamboo sliver into the liquid, and transfer a single tiny drop to the top of the first hinge pin. The oil spreads around the pin's head, seeping into the narrow gap between the plates, and you wait a moment for it to penetrate. Then you take hold of the hinge and move it, opening and closing the joint with a slow, deliberate motion that you repeat exactly 3 times. The first opening produces a faint, dry creak, a sound that is barely audible, like the chirp of a distant cricket. The second opening is smoother, the creak reduced to a whisper. By the third, the hinge moves in complete silence, its parts gliding against each other with a soft, fluid ease that speaks of oil doing its quiet work. You count the repetitions without conscious thought, the number 3 having emerged from your practice as the right measure, and you wipe away any excess oil with a clean cloth before moving to the next hinge. There are 3 hinges on each shin guard, one between the first and second splint, one between the second and third, and a smaller one at the ankle where the foot guard attaches. You oil and exercise each hinge on the left sunate in turn, listening to the gradual disappearance of the tiny sounds, feeling the joints loosen and then settle into their proper, silent alignment. The copper pins gleam faintly with their fresh coating of oil, and the patina takes on a slightly richer tone, as though the metal has been refreshed by the attention. The leather straps that secure the sunite to the leg are 3 in number, positioned at the top, middle and bottom of the guard. They are made of thick cowhide, dyed dark brown, and they fasten with small iron buckles that are simple and functional. You unbuckle each strap and lay it flat across your palm, flexing the leather to test its suppleness. The top strap, the widest and most heavily used, feels slightly stiff along its fold lines, and you apply a light dressing of deer fat, rubbing it into the hide with your thumb until the leather softens and the creases become pliable. The middle and bottom straps are in better condition, needing only a wipe with the dry cloth to remove the dust, and you buckle them back into place with a series of soft, metallic clicks. The foot guard, a curved plate of lacquered iron that extends from the ankle down over the top of the foot, receives its own share of attention. You wipe it clean with the cotton cloth, then polish it with the dry silk square until it gleams with the same subdued matte glow as the Haydate's tiles. The plate is shaped to follow the arch of a foot, its curve smooth and symmetrical, and it is attached to the shin guard by 2 small copper hinges that you oil and exercise as you did the others, opening and closing them 3 times each until they move without sound. The left sunite is now complete, its splints clean, its hinges silent, its leather straps supple and secure. You set it aside on the mat and reach for the right shin guard, lifting it from the base of the rack and bringing it to rest against your other knee. The process repeats itself in every detail: the inspection of the interior leather lining, the wiping of the lacquered splints with long vertical strokes, the cleaning of the gaps, the polishing of the copper hinges, the oiling of the hinge pins, the 3-fold opening and closing of each joint, the conditioning of the leather straps. You work with the same steady rhythm, your hands moving through the familiar sequence as though guided by a deep internal memory that requires no conscious thought. The right sunate proves to be in similar condition to the left, though one of its copper hinges has a pin that is slightly bent, perhaps from an old impact. The bend is small, a gentle arc that you notice only when you compare it to the other pins, and it does not affect the hinge's function. You decide to leave it as it is, knowing that the armor's history is written in such small imperfections, and you simply oil the pin and work the hinge through its 3 silent cycles before moving on. When both shin guards are finished, you lift them and carry them back to the armor rack, placing each one upright at the base, aligned with the thigh guard above. The sunnites stand side by side, their vertical splints catching the lantern light in long, narrow bands, their copper hinges glowing with a subtle, warm shimmer. The foot guards curve forward slightly, as though resting on an invisible pair of feet, and the leather straps hang loose, ready to be fastened around the legs of a warrior who is not here. The hadite hangs above them, its tiles a cascade of russet rectangles, and together they form the lower portion of the armor, completing the figure from waist to ankle. You return to your cushion and lower yourself into the familiar seated position, your knees spreading slightly to accommodate the long hours of stillness. The lanterns continue to burn, their flames a little shorter now, their oil wells having dropped by the width of a finger since you last checked. The room has grown cooler still, the stone walls holding the night's chill, and you draw your kimono sleeves a little closer around your wrists without breaking the quiet. The high window remains dark, a square of deep, velvety black that offers no hint of dawn, and the silence of the castle below has become so profound that you can hear, very faintly, the soft settling of a wooden beam somewhere in the keep. You fold your hands in your lap and look at the armor stand, now nearly fully assembled. The helmet and its neck guard crown the top. The face mask hangs just below. The chest plate spreads wide in the center. The shoulder guards and sleeves frame the upper body. And now the thigh guard and shin guards complete the lower section. The armor is a single unified presence, a figure of iron and silken leather that seems to breathe with the flicker of the lantern flames. The tiles of the hadate catch the light in a soft, scattered pattern, and the shin guards stand like patient, silent sentinels, their hinges oiled and still. You close your eyes for a moment, not from fatigue, but from a sense of deep, quiet completion, and you listen to the sound of your own breathing, a slow tide that rises and falls in time with the lanterns. The work of the evening has carried you through many pieces, many small, repetitive motions, and yet you feel no weariness, only the calm, steady presence that comes from full absorption in a task. When you open your eyes, the armor is still there, gleaming softly in the amber light, waiting for the final touches that will come in the hours ahead. The hadate and sunate are done, their lacquer polished, their hinges silent, and the room holds its peace as the night continues its slow, imperceptible drift toward morning. The armor stand now holds most of its pieces, each one cleaned and polished and returned to its place over the long hours of the evening. The chest plate stands firm at the center, its ochre braids catching the lantern light, and the shoulder guards frame it on either side like folded wings. The sleeves drape from the wooden arms, the thigh guard hangs below the chest plate, and the shin guards stand upright at the base. Only the helmet remains apart, still resting on its stand where you placed it after polishing its dome and relacing its neck guard, waiting to crown the assembly. You rise from your cushion and cross the room to where the kabuto sits, lifting it with both hands and carrying it back toward the rack with a slow, measured step that matches the quiet of the hour. You pause before the armor stand, holding the helmet at chest height, and look at the figure before you. The empty space where the helmet should sit seems to draw the eye upward, a gap that the surrounding pieces frame with a patient, silent expectation. The neck guard's mounting pegs wait on the upright post, 2 small wooden protrusions that will slot into the helmet's base, and the silk cords that will tie the mast to the helmet hang loose from the mempost side loops, their ends dangling in soft, dark strands. Everything is ready, and yet you do not rush. You stand still for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the kabuto in your hands, the smooth, cool lacquer pressing against your palms, and you let the silence gather around you like a held breath. You raise the helmet and guide it onto the post, lowering it slowly until the pegs engage with a soft, definite click that you feel through the wood rather than hear. The helmet settles into its place, its dome rising above the armor's shoulders, and the neck guard flares outward to meet the shoulder boards below. You step back half a pace and sight along the helmet's alignment, checking that it faces exactly forward, its front brim parallel with the chest plate's center line. A tiny deviation catches your eye, a shift of less than a finger's width to the left, and you correct it by nudging the helmet's base with a gentle, two-handed pressure that rotates it back into true. The adjustment is so small that it barely disturbs the air, and when you step back again, the helmet sits perfectly square, its dark dome a calm summit above the assembled armor. The silk cords that tie the face mask to the helmet require your attention next. They are attached to the small iron loops at the sides of the mempo, and they must be threaded up through the helmet's interior and tied in flat, symmetrical bows that will secure the mask without pulling it out of position. You take the left cord first, a length of dark indigo silk that has been twisted into a fine, tight braid, and you pass it upward through the leather band inside the helmet, then out through a small hole in the side of the neck guard. The cord slides through your fingers with a soft, dry whisper, and you pull it gently until the mask rises slightly against its hook, then stop. The tension must be enough to hold the mempo steady, but not so much that the silk strains or the mask presses too firmly against the helmet's rim. You judge this tension by feel, your fingers testing the cord's give, and when it is right, you tie a flat bow just below the neck guard's second band, the loops spreading outward in a neat, even pair. The right cord follows, threaded and pulled and tied in an identical bow, and then you compare the two, adjusting the left loop by a tiny fraction so that both bows match in size and angle. The mempo now hangs securely, its russet cheeks aligned with the helmet's brim, its empty eyes looking out from beneath the dark dome with a gaze that is both calm and inscrutable. The throat guard, a simple plate of curved iron that hangs from the helmet's lower rim, has shifted during the tying process, and you reach up to center it with a light, two-fingered touch. The plate moves easily, its leather hinge flexing without sound, and it settles into its proper place directly below the mempo's chin. You run your fingertip along the gap between the mask and the throat guard, feeling the even, parallel space that should exist there, a gap no wider than a grain of rice, and find it uniform from one side to the other. Satisfied, you withdraw your hand and turn your attention to the shoulder guards. The sewed hang on either side of the chest plate, their large rectangular panels suspended from the crossbar by broad leather straps that you buckled earlier in the evening. You examine the straps now, checking that the buckles are still tight and that the panels hang at the same height. The left sewed sits a fraction lower than the right, a difference so slight that it is only visible when you crouch down and sight along the bottom edges. You unbuckle the left strap, lift the panel by a thumb's width, and rebuckle it, drawing the leather snug against the crossbar. The panel rises into alignment, and you step back to confirm the correction. Now both sewed hang in perfect symmetry, their rows of lacquered skeins cascading downward in a smooth, uninterrupted fall, their silk lacing forming a matched pair of faded, colorful grids. The coat, the armored sleeves, drape from the wooden arms of the rack, and you turn your attention to their positioning. The sleeves should hang so that the elbow patches align with the chest plate side seams and the hand guards fall at the same level, their chainmail mesh catching the light in a uniform shimmer. You adjust the left sleeve first, lifting it slightly by the shoulder loop and letting it fall again, watching how the fabric settles. The heavy cotton has a natural drape that finds its own equilibrium, and you need only to smooth a small fold near the elbow with a gentle downward stroke of your palm. The right sleeve requires a similar smoothing, and you notice that one of the cloth ties, a narrow strip of brown fabric that would secure the sleeve to an arm, has become twisted. You untwist it with a patient two-fingered rotation, letting it hang straight and loose, then step back to view the full upper body. The armor now presents a complete silhouette from the waist upward, its dark lacquer and iron, forming a figure that is both imposing and serene. The chest plate's horizontal bands curve outward in a broad protective shell, the shoulder guards spread to either side, the sleeves fall in soft brown columns, and the helmet crowns the whole with its polished dome and its flared neck guard. The face mask sits at the center, its wrinkles and contours sharp in the lantern light, and the empty eye slits hold two small dark shadows that seem to contain the silence of the room. You lower yourself onto your cushion, not to rest but to bring your hands closer to the lower sections of the armor, where the remaining adjustments await. The heydate, the thigh guard of lacquered tiles, hangs from its leather loops just below the chest plate, and you check each loop in turn, giving it a gentle tug to confirm that it is secure. The leather is supple from the deer fat you applied earlier, and it grips the crossbar's wooden pegs without slipping. The tiles themselves hang in their 6 vertical columns, their russet surfaces overlapping in a neat shingled pattern that you have already polished to a soft glow. You run your palm lightly down the center column, feeling the tiles shift a tiny amount and then settle, and the faint dry clicking sound rises and fades like a brief musical sigh. The sunyate, the shin guards, stand at the base of the rack, their 3 vertical splints rising from the foot guards to just below the heydate's lower edge. You reach down and adjust the left shin guard first, making sure that its copper hinges face outward and that the leather straps hang straight, not twisted. The right shin guard follows, and you align its foot guard so that it points directly forward, matching its partner. The 2 sunyate now stand side by side like a pair of silent sentinels, their iron splints gleaming in long vertical stripes, their hinges dark and quiet. A small detail catches your eye as you sit back. One of the leather straps on the right shin guard has folded back on itself, its buckle hidden behind the calf area where it cannot be seen. You lean forward, reach into the narrow space between the shin guard and the heydate, and carefully unfold the strap, guiding it outward so that it hangs in plain view. The leather is cool and smooth, and it falls into place with a soft brushing sound against the iron. You test the buckle's tongue, pressing it down and releasing it to confirm that it springs back freely, and then you withdraw your hand and sit back on your heels. The lacing of the entire armor, the complex network of silk cords that binds every piece to its neighbor, now becomes the focus of your inspection. You start at the top, where the helmet's neck guard connects to the shoulder boards by means of a pair of long indigo cords that pass through rings on both pieces and tie at the back. These cords were loosened when you removed the helmet for polishing, and you now reach behind the armor stand to draw them tight. The cord on the left side pulls through its ring with a soft, hissing friction, and you tie it in a flat bow that mirrors the one you tied earlier for the face mask. The right cord follows, and you compare the 2 bows, adjusting the left one by a hair's width until they are identical. The shoulder guards now sit firmly against the neck guard, their upper edges aligned, their weight distributed evenly. The chest plate's side straps, which you buckled earlier when returning the do to the rack, are still secure, but you test each one again by pressing your thumb against the buckle and feeling for any give. The leather is firm, the bronze tongues seated deeply in their holes, and nothing shifts under pressure. The silk braids that separate the horizontal iron bands have remained clean and tight, their ochre color a warm, steady line that divides the russet lacquer into even segments. You run a fingertip along the topmost braid, tracing its course from left to right, and it feels smooth and springy, the fibers holding their twist. The sewed are connected to the chest plate by additional cords at their lower edges, cords that pass through small iron loops and tie in neat knots at the back. You check these knots now, reaching around the armor stand to feel each one with your fingers. The knots are tight and compact, their silk tails trimmed short and tucked out of sight, and none have loosened during the reassembly. You give each cord a gentle pull, feeling the resistance of a well-tied knot, and then withdraw your hands. The coat sleeves are held in place by their shoulder loops and by a secondary tie at the wrist that connects them to the chest plate's lower edge. You check these wrist ties, which are simple lengths of brown silk that you have threaded through small holes in the chest plate and tied in flat bows. The bows are still as you left them, their loops hanging in relaxed, even curves, and you see no need to adjust them. The chainmail mesh on the forearms glitters faintly as you brush past it, the tiny iron rings whispering against one another like a distant, metallic breeze. You rise from your cushion now and take a full step back from the armor rack, positioning yourself near the lantern on the left so that the light falls across the entire figure at a shallow angle. From this vantage, you can see the overall silhouette and the way the pieces relate to one another, the gaps and alignments that were invisible up close. The armor stands as a single, unified presence, its dark surfaces absorbing and reflecting the lantern glow in a complex pattern of highlights and shadows. The helmet's dome gleams at the top, a smooth, dark curve that mirrors the two flames as tiny, inverted teardrops. The face mask below it holds its own stillness, its russet cheeks and empty eyes creating an expression that is neither fierce nor peaceful, but simply present. A face that has seen much and reveals nothing. The chest plate swells outward, its horizontal bands creating a rhythm of light and dark, and the shoulder boards spread to the sides with their cascading scales, each one a small dark feather in a larger wing. The sleeves fall in soft brown lines, their chainmail a subtle texture against the cotton, and the thigh guard's tiles form a curtain of overlapping rectangles that shimmers faintly as you move. The shin guards rise from the floor, their vertical splints like the trunks of young trees, straight and strong, and the foot guards curve forward at the base, completing the figure from crown to toe. You walk slowly around the rack, your footsteps silent on the tatami mats, and study the armor from every angle. The left side reveals a symmetry of cords and straps that matches the right, the back shows the leather hinge of the chest plate and the neat rows of knots that secure the lacing, and the front remains the face of the armor, the part that would meet the world. You pause at the front and notice that one of the sewed silk cords, a thin gold line that runs along the outer edge of the shoulder guard, has a slight kink in it, a small bend where it caught on something during the reassembly. You reach out and smooth the cord between your thumb and forefinger, drawing the kink out with a slow, steady pressure until the silk lies flat and straight. The adjustment takes only a moment, and when you withdraw your hand, the cord gleams in an unbroken line from the shoulder to the elbow. Another small imperfection draws your eye, a toggle on the chest plate's lower edge, a small iron loop that serves an attachment point for a secondary piece of armor that is not present tonight, sits slightly crooked, tilted inward by perhaps the width of a fingernail. You reach down and grasp the toggle between your fingers, applying a gentle, twisting pressure that rotates it back into alignment with its neighbors. The iron moves smoothly, its rivets turning in its hole with a faint, gritty sensation, and then it stops, perfectly straight. You test it with a light wiggle and find it firm. The row of toggles now forms a neat, even line along the bottom of the chest plate, each one identical in its angle and spacing. You circle the rack one more time, checking the back for any twisted straps, any loose knots, any dust that might have settled during the reassembly. The lantern light falls differently here, casting the armor's back into deeper shadow, and you bring the second lantern closer, lifting it from its stone tile and holding it aloft so that the glow reaches every crevice. The leather hinge of the chest plate is smooth and clean, the knots on the sewed are tight, the thigh guard's loops are secure. You see nothing that requires adjustment, and you return the lantern to its place, the flame flickering once at the movement and then steadying. You step back to the front of the rack and stand with your hands at your sides, your breathing slow and even, your body relaxed in the quiet. The armor is now fully reassembled, every piece in its proper place, every cord and strap and toggle adjusted to a state of quiet perfection. The figure before you is not a warrior, not a ghost, but something in between, a silent custodian of the lantern light, a shape that has absorbed the care of your hands, and now holds it within the lacquer and silk and iron. The room seems to have settled around the armor, the walls leaning in to listen, the shadows deepening in the corners, and the twin flames burning with a steady, golden patience that has no need of time. You lower yourself onto your cushion one last time, facing the armor, and let your gaze rest upon the figure as a whole. The sense of completion is quiet, not triumphant, a simple recognition that the work of reassembly is done and the armor stands as it should. You notice the way the lantern light plays over the different surfaces, the high gloss of the helmet, the matte depth of the chest plate, the textured shimmer of the chainmail, the soft, velvety darkness of the fabric sleeves. Each material holds the light in its own way, and together they create a harmony of amber and russet and indigo and brown, a palette that is warm and calm and ancient. You fold your hands in your lap and allow yourself a long, slow breath, the first conscious breath you have taken in what feels like many hours. The air in the room is cool and faintly scented with clove and old leather, and it fills your lungs with a clean, quiet freshness. The castle below is still silent, the servants and guards deep in their sleep, and the night beyond the high window remains dark and still. You have no way of knowing how much time has passed since you lit the lanterns, but you feel no urgency to find out. The armor stands before you, complete and calm, and that is enough. You rise from the cushion where you have spent the long hours of the evening, the movements slow and deliberate, your knees unfolding with the soft creak of joints that have been still too long. The lantern on your left has burned down to a shorter flame, its oil well half empty, but its light remains steady and golden. You lift it carefully from its stone tile, curling your fingers around the bronze base where the metal is warm but not hot, and you hold it before you at waist height, allowing its glow to pool around your feet and spill outward across the tatami mats. The second lantern stays where it is, burning beside the armor rack, and together the two flames cast a shifting, overlapping light that fills the small room with deep amber and soft dancing shadows. You turn to face the assembled armor, standing a few paces back so that the full figure comes into view. The helmet rises at the top, its lacquered dome a smooth, dark curve that catches the lantern light and holds it in a single bright point on its highest crest. Below the dome, the neck guard flares outward in its 5 overlapping bands, the indigo silk lacing dark against the black lacquer, the cords you retied earlier hanging in neat flat bows. The face mask sits beneath the helmet's brim, its russet cheeks and sculpted wrinkles distinct in the warm light. Its empty eye slits holding 2 pockets of shadow that seem to deepen as you watch. The throat guard curves beneath the chin, a simple iron plate that you centered with your fingertips not long ago. The chest plate swells outward from the shoulders, its horizontal band separated by the ochre silk braids, and the shoulder guards spread to either side like folded wings, their hundreds of small scales catching the light in a textured shimmer. The sleeves drape from the wooden arms, their brown fabric soft and heavy, the chainmail mesh on the forearms glinting with a faint, scattered sparkle. The thigh guard hangs below the chest plate, its tiles a cascade of russet rectangles, and the shin guards stand upright at the base, their vertical splints straight and gleaming, the foot guards curving forward to complete the figure. You lift the lantern a little higher, raising it to shoulder height, and begin your slow circuit of the armor. Your first steps take you to the left side, where the shoulder guard's edge aligns with the chest plate's seam, and you pause there, holding the lantern close so that its light rakes across the surfaces at a shallow angle. The lacquer on the sewed scales reveals a uniform matte depth, each small plate reflecting a soft oval highlight that shifts as you move the lantern a fraction to one side. You can see the fine grain of the leather beneath the lacquer, a subtle texture that runs in faint, parallel lines, and you note that the polishing you did earlier has left no streaks or dull patches. The silk lacing that binds the scales together lies flat and even, its faded indigo and cream and gold threads crossing in a regular geometric pattern, and you run a fingertip along one of the horizontal rows to feel the slight, springy resistance of the cords. They are all tight, none loose or twisted, and you withdraw your hand and move on. The left sleeve comes next, its heavy cotton fabric draping from the wooden arm of the rack. You bring the lantern close to the elbow patch, a reinforced section of dark leather that you conditioned with deer fat earlier, and you see that the leather has absorbed the fat evenly, leaving no shiny residue or dry spots. The stitching around the patch is a double row of small, even dashes, and you trace them with your eyes, following the line from one side to the other. The chainmail on the forearm catches the lantern light and scatters it into 100 tiny points, each iron ring, a small dark circle with a bright rim, and you tilt the lantern to make the sparkle dance across the mesh. The rings are all clean, free of rust, and the oil you applied has left a fine protective film that gives the metal a subdued, pewter-like glow. The handguard, a lacquered plate shaped to cover the back of a hand, hangs at the bottom of the sleeve, and you crouch slightly to inspect it. running the lantern light over its surface. The lacquer is smooth and unbroken, its russet tone matching the rest of the armor, and the small copper rivets that secure it to the fabric gleam with a soft, reddish warmth. You straighten and continue your circuit, moving behind the armor rack where the back of the figure faces the wall. Here the light from your lantern mingles with the glow of the second lantern still burning on its tile, and the shadows become more complex, overlapping and separating as you shift your weight. The back of the chest plate is as clean and polished as the front, its horizontal bands and ochre braids running in uninterrupted curves, and the leather hinge that connects the two halves at the shoulder is visible as a broad, dark strip that you inspect by lowering the lantern to its level. The hinges stitching is tight, the leather supple and free of cracks, and the small copper rivets that reinforce the joint are all present and firm. You test the hinge by pressing it gently with your thumb, feeling the leather flex and then spring back, and the motion is silent and smooth. The knots on the reverse side of the shoulder guards, where the silk cords are tied to secure the sewed to the chest plate, are all as you left them, tight, compact, their tails trimmed short and tucked out of sight. You count them quickly, a silent tally that matches the number you already know, and then run the lantern light along the row to confirm that none have loosened. The cords are dark against the fabric backing of the sewed, and they absorb the light rather than reflecting it, making the knots appear as small, dense shadows. You reach out and touch one of the knots, pressing it between your thumb and forefinger, and it feels hard and solid, the silk fibers compacted into a tight, unyielding mass. You move to the right side of the armor and repeat the inspection, your steps slow and measured, the lantern held steady in your grip. The right shoulder guard, the right sleeve, the right side of the chest plate all pass under your scrutiny, and you find the same uniform sheen, the same tight lacing, the same clean, polished surfaces that you saw on the left. A small variation catches your eye on the right sleeve's wrist tie. The brown silk bow has a loop that is slightly longer than its partner, a difference of perhaps a finger's width, and you pause to adjust it, pulling the shorter loop gently until the two match. The silk slides through the knot with a faint, soft hiss, and then the bow sits even, its loops symmetrical and relaxed. You nod, a small, private gesture that no one else will ever know about, and continue. Now you step to the front of the armor once more, and you lower yourself into a crouch so that the lantern light can reach the lower sections, the thigh guard and the shin guards. The Hodate's tiles gleam in their vertical columns, and you pass the lantern slowly across them from left to right, watching the highlights glide over each small rectangle in sequence. The tiles are all secure, their stitching checked and reinforced, and the polishing you did with the dry silk has left them with a quiet, semi-matte luster that seems to absorb and soften the light rather than reflecting it harshly. You notice, at the edge of one tile in the third column, a tiny speck of something pale that catches the light differently, a fleck no larger than a grain of sand. You lean closer, bringing the lantern to within a hand's width of the surface, and you see that it is a small remnant of polishing paste, dried to a faint grey crust, that must have lodged itself here when you were working on the face mask earlier, and somehow drifted down. The speck is so small that it would be invisible in any other light, but the lantern's low, raking angle reveals it clearly. You reach into your sleeve and retrieve a soft, clean scrap of linen that you keep there for such small corrections, and you moisten a corner of it with the barest touch of your tongue, just enough to dampen the fibers. Then you press the cloth to the speck and lift it away with a single delicate dab, leaving the tile clean and unmarked. You examine the spot again, tilting the lantern to be sure, and the tile surface is now as uniform as its neighbors, the tiny blemish erased as if it had never been. You tuck the linen scrap back into your sleeve and rise from your crouch, your knees making that same soft creak, and you resume your slow circuit. The shin guards receive the lantern's attention next, their vertical splints shining in long, narrow bands of russet lacquer. You kneel beside the right sunyate, setting the lantern on the mat beside you, so that its light shines upward across the iron, and you run your fingers over the surface of each splint, feeling for any roughness or grit that the eye might miss. The metal is smooth and cool, and your fingertips encounter nothing but the subtle, hammered texture that lies beneath the lacquer. The copper hinges, dark with patina, are silent when you test them, opening and closing with a fluid, effortless motion that you confirm by pressing each one gently with your thumb. They all move without sound, just as they did when you oiled them. The leather straps hang straight and clean, their buckles polished and their tongues springy, and you check that each strap is properly aligned, not twisted or folded back on itself. The left shin guard receives the same examination, and you find it equally sound, its splints gleaming, its hinges silent, its straps ready. The foot guards, those curved plates at the very base of the armor, are the final pieces to inspect. You crouch low, bringing the lantern down to the mat, and let the light play across the dark lacquer. The plates are shaped like the tops of feet, their curves smooth and symmetrical, and they reflect the lantern flame as a distorted, elongated teardrop. You run a finger along the edge of each footguard, where the iron meets the tatami, and feel no burrs or rough spots, only the cool, rounded edge of well-finished metal. The small copper hinges that attach the footguards to the shin splints are dark and quiet, and you test them with a single, gentle press of your fingertip, feeling them flex and return without resistance. You rise to your feet once more and take a step back, holding the lantern at chest height, and you let your gaze travel slowly upward from the footguards to the helmet's crest, scanning the entire figure in one continuous, unhurried pass. The armor stands in the lantern light like a figure from a dream, its surfaces glowing with a deep, quiet richness that speaks of the hours of care you have given it. The speck of paste is gone, the cords are straight, the leather is supple, the hinges are silent. Everything is as it should be, and you feel a calm, steady sense of completeness that has no name but fills the room like the lantern light itself. You turn your attention now to the leather straps once more, not because you doubt them, but because the final inspection includes this second, deliberate testing, a ritual of touch that confirms what your eyes have already seen. You walk to the left side of the armor and take the upper strap of the chest plate between your fingers, flexing it slowly, feeling the hide bend, and then return. The leather is cool and pliable, its surface slightly textured from the deer fat you worked into it, and it makes no sound as it moves. The lower strap follows, then the shoulder guard's buckle strap, then the sleeve's shoulder loop, each one tested with the same gentle, probing pressure. You move to the right side and repeat the process, your fingers moving from strap to strap in a slow, methodical sequence, and each piece of leather responds with the same quiet, supple give. The silk cords are next, and you check them for any twist or kink that might have developed during your inspection. You start at the helmet, where the face mask ties hang in their indigo bows, and you run each cord between your thumb and forefinger, tracing its length from the knot to the iron loop. The silk is smooth and cool, its twist tight and even, and the cords lie flat against the neck guard without any crossed or twisted sections. The shoulder guard cords, the ones that connect the sewed to the chest plate at the back, you check by reaching around the rack and feeling each one in turn, your fingers finding the familiar compact knots and the straight taut lines of silk. The wrist ties on the sleeves are straight and even, their bows symmetrical, and the small adjustment you made earlier has held. No cord is twisted, no knot is loose, and you withdraw your hands with a quiet internal nod. During this final pass, your breathing has slowed to a pace so gentle that it merges with the soft sizzle of the lantern wick beside you, a tiny continuous sound that is the only audible thing in the room besides the faint whisper of your movements. You notice this without surprise, as if it is the natural state of things, and you stand still for a moment, simply listening to the twin sounds of your breath and the flame, two quiet rhythms that have accompanied you through the entire evening. The lantern in your hand is warm, its bronze base now heated through by the long burning flame, and you feel that warmth travel up your arm and into your chest, a small, steady comfort against the cool air of the keep. The stone walls around you hold the deep night chill at bay, but only just. The cold has seeped into the room over the hours, and you can feel it now on the back of your neck and the tips of your ears. It is not an unpleasant cold, merely a presence, a reminder that beyond this small lit chamber the castle lies in darkness, and the mountain air is crisp and still. The high window shows a square of absolute black, the stars hidden by clouds or by the angle of the sill, and no sound penetrates from outside. The castle below, with its sleeping attendants and resting guards, and the fountain that has stopped its murmur, is as silent as the stone itself, a deep, profound quiet that seems to press gently against the walls from all sides. You walk slowly around the armour one final time, completing a full circle that brings you back to your cushion, where you set the lantern down on its stone tile with a soft, careful click. The flame flickers once at the motion and then steadies, its light joining that of the second lantern to bathe the room in a warm amber glow. You lower yourself onto the cushion, your knees finding their familiar hollows, your spine straightening, and you face the armour with your hands resting palms up on your thighs. The figure stands before you, complete and silent, its surfaces holding the lantern light like a vessel holds water, and you let your gaze rest upon it without any need to look away. The speck of paste is gone, the leather is checked, the cords are straight, the hinges are oiled and still. The armour has passed its final inspection, and the night has passed its deepest hour. You close your eyes for a moment, not from tiredness, but from a sense of quiet arrival, and you listen to the twin lanterns breathe beside you, a steady, golden pulse that is the heartbeat of the room. When you open your eyes again, the armour is still there, unchanged, waiting in the deep silence of the keep, and you know that your work is nearly done. The work is complete. You have checked every strap, smoothed every cord, polished every surface, and the armour stands before you in the lantern light, silent and whole. Now there is only the closing of the evening, the slow, careful return of tools to their places, the extinguishing of flames, and the quiet departure from this small room at the top of the keep. You remain on your cushion for a few moments longer, letting the stillness settle around you, feeling the weight of the completed hours press gently against your shoulders. The twin lanterns burn with their shortened flames, their oil wells low but still sufficient, and their light casts a warm amber circle that has become the entire world. You reach first for the cotton cloths, the ones you used for wiping and buffing and polishing, and you gather them from the mat where they lie in a loose pile near your right knee. Some are still clean, folded into neat squares, others are darkened with dust and oil and the faint grey residue of polishing paste. You separate them by touch, placing the soiled cloths into a small linen bag that hangs from a hook on the side of the shelf, a bag that will be carried down to the washing quarters in the morning. The clean cloths you fold again, smoothing each one flat against your thigh, then stack them in a tidy pile on the shelf's lower board, aligned with the edge so that they sit straight and ready for the next evening. The fabric is soft and worn, its fibers loosened by many washings, and it holds a faint, clean scent of the plain soap used in the castle's laundry. The deer leather comes next, and you pick it up from where it rests beside the oil pot, its surface darkened in patches where it absorbed the clove oil and the iron dust. You fold the leather in half, then in half again, pressing the creases flat with your thumb, and you set it in its designated spot on the shelf, a small, shallow tray that holds the leather and the squirrel hair brush together. The brush itself you inspect briefly, running your fingertip over the bristles to check for any trapped dust or oil, and finding it clean, you place it beside the leather, with its handle pointing outward, as you always do. The ceramic dish of powdered whetstone still holds a small amount of unused powder, the fine grey dust settled into a level, even layer. You lift the dish, fit its wooden lid into place with a soft press of your palm, and return it to the shelf, where it sits beside the pot of clove-scented oil. The oil pot stopper is still wrapped in its waxed cord, and you check that it is tight, pressing down on the wooden plug with a firm, two-fingered push. A faint, spicy fragrance rises from the pot as you handle it, the last breath of clove escaping into the room, and then it fades, leaving only the memory of the scent. The bamboo pick, the wooden needle, and the small knife all lie in their shallow tray, and you gather them together, wiping each one with a clean scrap of linen before placing it back in its proper slot. The knife's blade is still wrapped in its oiled paper, and you check that the paper is secure, tucking the loose end under the wrapped section so that it will not come undone. The needle shows a slight darkening at its tip where it passed through the silk cords, and you rub this away with the linen until the boxwood gleams again, pale and smooth. The bamboo pick, thin and flexible, has a tiny, almost invisible bend near its point. A bend that has been there as long as you can remember and which you accept without concern, knowing that it does not affect its use. You lay the pick in its slot, the needle beside it, the knife at the end, and the tray is complete. The small earthenware pot of deer fat sits open on the mat, its contents diminished by the amount you worked into the leather straps and hinges earlier in the evening. You wipe the rim clean with a corner of linen, removing the thin, greasy film that has gathered there, and then you press the lid into place, twisting it slightly to create a seal. The pot goes onto the shelf beside the oil and the whetstone, its cool, pale surface catching the lantern light with a soft, matte gleam. The pot of rice glue, which you use to seal the frayed silk cords, is already closed and returned to its place, and you check its lid with a quick, light touch before moving on. The water bowl, a small ceramic vessel that held the clean water for dampening the cloths, now contains a shallow pool of cloudy liquid, faintly grey with the dust and oil it has absorbed. You lift the bowl and carry it to the corner of the room, where a narrow drain hole covered by a wooden grating allows wastewater to seep down into the castle's drainage channels. You pour the water slowly, tilting the bowl until the liquid runs out in a thin, silent stream, and then you wipe the bowl dry with a scrap of linen and return it to the shelf, upside down, so that any remaining moisture can evaporate. The waste bowl, the small wooden container into which you dropped the dust, and the trim silk threads and the dried flecks of paste, is nearly full. You carry it to the corner and empty it into a cloth pouch that hangs beside the drain, a pouch that will be taken down and cleaned in the morning. The bowl you wipe with a dry cloth and set back on the shelf, its interior now clean and ready for the next use. The palette stone, the flat, smooth rock on which you mix the polishing paste, bears a dried grey crust where the paste hardened at the edges of the mixing area. You take a damp cloth and scrub the stone gently, using small circular motions that dissolve the crust and lift it away, leaving the surface clean and pale. The stone is cool and heavy, and you dry it with a fresh cloth before placing it on the shelf beside the whetstone dish, where it will wait until it is needed again. The spare silk cords and the bundle of linen thread, the small case of pigeon feathers, the extra cotton cloths, the beeswax block, all of these items are checked and tidied and returned to their designated spots. The shelf, which at the start of the evening was a neat arrangement of tools and materials, is now a neat arrangement once more, every item in its place, every surface clean. You stand before it for a moment, letting your eyes travel over the rows of objects, confirming that nothing is out of order, that nothing has been forgotten. The orderliness is its own quiet satisfaction, a small private completion that mirrors the larger completion of the armour itself. Now you turn to face the armour stand one final time, and you let your gaze travel upward from the foot guards to the helmet's crest, a slow vertical passage that takes in every piece. The shin guards stand straight and gleaming, their copper hinges dark and silent. The thigh guard hangs in its cascade of tiles, each one a small russet rectangle that holds a soft point of light. The chest plate curves outward, its horizontal bands and ochre braids creating a rhythm of light and shadow. The shoulder guards spread to either side, their scales overlapping like feathers. The sleeves drape from the wooden arms, their chainmail a faint, scattered shimmer. The throat guard and face mask sit beneath the helmet, the mask's empty eyes collecting the amber glow. The helmet rises above it all, its polished dome reflecting the two lantern flames as tiny inverted teardrops that seem to float on the dark lacquer. The armour is complete, and you have seen every part of it, touched every surface, tightened every cord. There is nothing more to do, and yet you linger for a moment, standing in the center of the room with your hands loosely at your sides, your breathing slow and deep. The silence has become so profound that it seems to have a texture, a soft, heavy presence that wraps around you like a thick quilt, and you feel yourself merging with it, becoming a part of the stillness rather than an observer of it. The lanterns are waiting to be extinguished. You walk to the second lantern, the one that has been burning on the far side of the armor rack, and you kneel beside it, your shadow falling long and dark across the tatami. The flame is a short, steady teardrop, its base a bright, wavering blue that transitions upward into a soft golden point. You cup your hand behind the flame, feeling the faint warmth against your palm, and you lean close, your lips parting slightly. A single, gentle breath passes from your mouth to the wick, and the flame bends, flutters, and goes out. A thin ribbon of smoke rises from the darkened wick, curling upward in a delicate grey spiral that catches the light from the remaining lantern for just a moment, and then it disperses, leaving only the faint, acrid scent of burnt cotton and hot oil. The room is dimmer now, the shadows deeper and longer, the light from the single remaining lantern no longer able to reach every corner. The armor stand seems to shift in the changed light, its surfaces losing some of their detail and becoming more mysterious, more like a single, unified shape than a collection of separate pieces. You rise from your crouch and walk back to the first lantern, the one that has been your companion through the long hours, and you stand beside it, looking down at the steady, patient flame. You do not blow it out immediately. Instead, you take one last look around the room, letting your eyes adjust to the reduced light. The shelf with its neat rows of tools, the cushion where you sat for so many hours, the armor stand with its silent figure, the high window with its square of absolute black, the wooden beams overhead, the plastered walls with their faint shadowy texture, all of these things have become familiar to you, not just tonight but over many nights, and you say a silent, wordless farewell to them, knowing that you will return when the evening comes again. You kneel beside the lantern, your kimono rustling softly against the tatami, and you cup your hand behind the flame as you did before. The warmth is stronger here, the lantern having burned longer, and the bronze base now fully heated, and you feel it against your palm and your cheeks, a small, comforting glow that you will miss when it is gone. You lean forward, purse your lips, and send a gentle stream of air across the wick, watching the flame bend and dance and then vanish, its light extinguished as easily as a thought. The smoke rises in its thin grey column, and then it too is gone, and the room falls into darkness. The darkness is not complete. As your eyes adjust, you become aware of a faint silver light that seems to come from the high window, a light so soft and diffuse that it barely illuminates anything but which nonetheless fills the room with a pale, ghostly presence. The moon, or perhaps the first hint of a very distant dawn, has found a gap in the clouds and is sending its light through the oiled paper of the window, casting a dim grey rectangle on the wall above the armor stand. You remain kneeling on the cushion, your hands resting on your thighs, and you watch as the silver light slowly, almost imperceptibly, brightens. The armor catches this new light in a way that is different from how it caught the lantern glow. Where the lantern's amber light was warm and intimate, painting the lacquer in rich golden tones, the moonlight is cool and distant, transforming the same surfaces into shades of silver and deep velvety black. A thin line of pale light traces the curve of the helmet's dome, running from the crest down to the brim, a delicate, luminous thread that seems to hover just above the lacquer. The face mask's cheeks, which were russet and glowing under the lanterns, are now dark and shadowed, but the edge of the nose and the ridge of the chin catch the moonlight in faint, sharp highlights that give the mask a different kind of presence, quieter and more remote. The chest plate's horizontal bands are visible as a series of dark, curving stripes, each one separated from the next by the faint, silvery gleam of the ochre braids, which have taken on a pale, ghostly tone. The shoulder guards are dark masses, their scales visible only as a subtle textured darkness that shifts slightly as the moonlight moves across them. The sleeves are pools of shadow, their brown fabric indistinguishable from the surrounding darkness, but the chainmail mesh on the forearms catches the moon in a faint, scattered sparkle, like a handful of tiny silver seeds thrown across the dark. The thigh guard is a cascade of soft, rectangular highlights, each tile catching the light on its upper edge and then falling into shadow below. The shin guards stand like dark pillars, their vertical splints reflecting the moon in long, narrow streaks that run from knee to ankle. You rise from your cushion for the final time, the movement slow and silent, your body feeling light and empty in the darkness. You stand before the armor, a dark figure facing a dark figure, and you feel a quiet, wordless connection to the silent shape that has occupied your entire evening. The armor will remain here, standing in the darkness, holding the moonlight on its surfaces until the dawn comes and the first grey light of morning fills the room. Then the servants will stir, the guards will change their posts, the fountain in the inner garden will begin its murmur, and the